Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So I'm back for another season of Roscoe's recaps, and this viewing party was for All Stars 9 episode 1. And I think they were supposed to also do episode 2, but I think they ran out of time, so they're going to do it next week instead, I believe. And the guests at Roscoe's this week were Naomi Smalls and Detox. Today we're going to be talking about Naysha spilling some backstage tea about how much the queens got paid to be on All Stars 9. Detox implies that Roxy Andrews may have snuck a phone with her on the set of All Stars 9. And some unrelated drama to do with Kim Chi calling out Eureka. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. So they started by talking about the Queen's entrances, and when they got to Georges and Angeria, who are both from season 14, Naysha asked the others what they felt about Queens doing All Stars after only a year or two after their original seasons. Detox said that she's said this in the past already, but she thinks they need to take a break in how often they release an all-star season anyway, and, quote, let us have some space to breathe and get excited. And the fun of it has, quote, fizzled out, because we know who's going to be on the seasons before they come out, so it's not surprising anymore. But Detox also said that at least this All-Stars season has a new twist with the charity element and also the no eliminations. Naysha also said what she likes about All-Stars is we get to see queens who we haven't seen for a while, such as Chanel, but also queens like Nina West, who don't do necessarily that many appearances on the show or come back as lip-sync assassins. Naomi said she can understand why the queens want to go back to All Stars so soon, because she was, quote, itching to go back after her original season, and she had 3 years between season 8 and All Stars 4. And Naomi joked that it was enough time to, quote, learn how to properly glue down a wig. They then got to Roxy Andrews' entrance where she said, baby, you can't read the doll, which went viral online when the preview of the season was released.
Baby, you can't read the doll.
And Naysha asked if people knew where this reference came from. Naysha explained that back when Roxy competed in the Miss Continental pageant, and Roxy has competed several times, but I believe the time she's referring to is 2019. And at the time, the queens used to go live on Facebook all the time to talk about it. And from what I can find, Roxy was on Facebook Live for over an hour, and there's a copy of the entire video on YouTube, and I'll put a link in the description. And in the video, Roxy is seemingly annoyed about the pageant, and she goes on what Naysha describes as a, quote, fierce rant. And at one point, Roxy says this.
And if I don't do enough, like blow fire out of my ass, y'all want to get online and read? You can't read the doll. Mama, y'all are still trying to figure out to do what the fuck I'm doing. How about that?
And so it's presumed that this is why Roxy decided to use this line as her entrance line on All Stars 9. They then moved on, and Naysha said that there are no eliminations this season and asked the others what they thought about that. Some people in the audience then apparently shouted out that they hated it, and Naysha turned to whoever said it and said, quote, if you can sponsor each girl $50,000 to compete, then you can do that, because that's the reason that no one is getting eliminated. Detox said she loves that they're doing it for charity this season, and because no one gets eliminated, it gives all of them an opportunity to win more money for their charity. Detox also said it's great to be able to give back to the community, especially when the community gets so much hate, so it's great to have representation of the queens on TV. Naomi said she likes it, and it's definitely a, quote, different game than it used to be, but it's not a bad thing, and change is a good thing, especially if they're now paying the girls to be on the show. Naysha then said in a kind of jokey way, quote, rumour has it, I can't confirm this, and then she winked and everyone laughed. Naysha then said that each queen got $75,000, and of that, $25,000 was for the outfits, and the remaining $50,000 was to be on the season. But Naysha made the point that you have to remember that some queens spend between $30,000 to $50,000 to compete on All Stars, and they don't make any of that money back until they get off the season and start working again. So Naysha said she feels that this was a, quote, good move on Drag Race's part, because she thinks we're going to get some of the best runways this season. Detox then asked where Naysha had heard this information, and there was a pause and people laughed. And Naysha just smiled and said, quote, "I'm assuming that if you got that much coin, you would have some really good runways." Naysha also said there was another bit of tea that she wanted to share, and this was that last year for All Stars 8, which Naysha was on, apparently they kept calling queens to get them to be on the show, but when the queens found out that there were going to be actual eliminations, many of the queens said no. So Naysha said that no one wanted to do All Stars and spend that much money to just get sent home, especially because, quote, "the toxic part of the fandom tears the queens apart if they go on the show and things don't go their way." Detox agreed and said that it's completely valid that the queens feel that way. And Naysha said that's why this year they got a really good cast, because there were no eliminations. They then talked about the fact that the queens in this episode did a group number where they wrote their own verses rather than a talent show. And Caramel asked if they preferred a group number or a talent show. Detox said she prefers a group number because there are so many talent shows these days. And also she thinks a group number is more challenging than a talent show because you usually only find out about it on the day, and so you have to write the verse and do the choreography. So it, quote, pushes people more, and there are no eliminations this time, so there's no risks. And Naysha said, quote, "Do you not see how much fun they're having right now because there is nothing at stake except for a pin/badge?" And everyone laughed, and Detox said, quote, "Someone is mad they was not on All Stars 9. Caramel then said she felt it was, quote, detrimental that on the last All Stars, which was All Stars 8, they had actual eliminations, but now they don't have eliminations. So Caramel thinks that no eliminations is going to be the new format for all seasons in the future, and it will incentivize more queens to go back for All Stars. Detox also said it's also good that they have queens from older seasons, and for example, they filmed All Stars 2 around 7 or 8 years ago, so Roxy has changed so much since then. And also, Chanel has changed a lot since she was on Season 1 and All Stars 1, and many of the new fans might not have heard of Chanel if they haven't watched the older seasons. So being on All Stars 9 is a chance for these older season queens to get a new audience. Caramel then asked if Detox was opposed to queens going back on All Stars 3 or 4 times. Detox's voice went really high and she said no and kind of smiled. And Naysha said it depends on which queen it is, because some queens are really good on the show even if they've been on multiple times. Naysha then asked if Detox or Naomi would ever go back on another All Stars. And she also said, does seeing their friend like Roxy going back give them, quote, an itch to go back themselves if there are no eliminations? Detox said, quote, honestly, I have an itch. And everyone cheered and clapped when Detox said that. Detox laughed and continued and said that she hasn't had that itch to go back on All Stars for a while. And Batty Davis joked and said that Detox should get that itch checked out by a doctor, and people laughed. Detox then carried on and said that this is the first time we've seen Roxy on Drag Race without Relaskatox, which is weird but exciting. And then Detox put the mic away from her mouth as she said this, but I increased the volume and it sounded like Detox said that Roxy snuck a phone with her on the set of All Stars 9, and so Detox got to speak to Roxy on the phone while she was away filming. And Detox said Roxy said to her that it was so weird not having Detox there because they're so close. But at the same time, it's exciting for Roxy to do this on her own for the first time. Detox also said that she's got back into Drag Race in the last few years because they had people on like Sasha Colby and some of her other friends, and Detox said that she missed the camaraderie of being in the workroom. And Detox said for years she was like, quote, no, F them, presumably referring to Drag Race asking her to come back. But now Detox said she's more like, quote, oh, wait a minute now. Naysha then asked Naomi if she would ever go back on All Stars, and Naomi said that she isn't a pageant queen, but she thinks of Drag Race like the biggest pageant and she loves a competition. And she's never won Drag Race yet, and she said, quote, so who knows, maybe one day. But she also said that watching this season and seeing all of the queens who are friends of hers gives her a bit of FOMO, or fear of missing out. Except Naomi accidentally said MIA, which means missing in action, and everyone laughed and Naomi corrected herself. And Detox joked and said that if Naomi goes MIA next year, they'll know that she's on the show. And Detox then said that they should just go on vacation to make people think that they're filming All Stars. Naysha then mentioned that speaking of vacations, there was something that happened to do with videos on YouTube that have lists of queens who are suspected to be on Drag Race. And there was apparently this one queen who kept being on the list every year of queens who are rumoured to be on the new season. And so the queen disappeared and then came back, and people asked if she had been away filming Drag Race, and the queen would act all mysterious and say things like, quote, "I don't know." But Naysha said the fierce part about it is that the queen would then take bookings based on the fact that people thought that she was going to be on Drag Race, but she never actually was, and she was just using the speculation to help her get more bookings. And all of the queens at Roscoe seemed to know which queen they were talking about, but none of them wanted to say the name. But then Detox shouted out what sounded like the word 6, so I assume this was a clue. However, I tried to do some research to see if I could figure out who it was, but I couldn't find anything. They then watched the part of the episode where RuPaul did a performance on the main stage, and they all laughed, and Naysha said her favourite part is that after RuPaul performed, Michelle said that there were, quote, "no crumbs left." But then when the queens came out and did their number, they did 5 times what RuPaul did, and Michelle just goes, quote, "meh," and that they have no personality. Detox also joked that she knew all of RuPaul's choreography because RuPaul does the same thing every time she does a number, and it's just a step touch, and Detox did an impression of it. Detox also asked if anyone had seen that RuPaul recently did a TikTok video where he did a blind karaoke to see if he could recognise the song and knew the lyrics. And there was a bit where they played one of RuPaul's own songs, Sissy That Walk, and RuPaul didn't know the lyrics. And just in case you haven't seen the video, here is a clip. Naysha commented about the vocals, but Detox said it wasn't just the vocals, it was that RuPaul makes all the contestants learn the words to his song when they're on the show, but then, quote, "this bee don't even know her own damn lyrics," and everyone laughed. They then talked about the Queen's performances in the girl group number on All Stars 9. They asked if anyone stood out in the group and they said Plastique, but Detox said she wasn't in love with Plastique's lyrics. But Caramel said that because Plastique looked so fierce and everyone was cheering, none of them could hear the lyrics anyway. They also said that there seemed to be a volume issue, and some of the queens, such as Gottmik, were very quiet and you couldn't really hear their verse very well, whereas Nina's vocals were loud and clear. They also mentioned Chanel and said it looked like she forgot some of the words to her verse, and Detox said it looked a bit, quote, fumbly. They then moved on to the runway, and the category was Signature Look, Signature Fragrance. And Caramel mentioned that the last time they did a fragrance on Drag Race was season 5, which was Detox's season. And she brought up Detox's perfume ad, where she kept saying the name of her perfume, which was Heroin, in a deep voice.
Seduction, addiction, heroin.
And Detox shared some tea about this and said that when they filmed that, she had told them specifically that when she said the word heroin in that deep voice, it was only supposed to be a voiceover and not her face on camera. But they did end up showing her face in the advert even though she said not to. They then talked about the judges' critiques, which were all positive, and Naysha said she hopes that it's not like that for the rest of the season because there are no eliminations, so you can give a little bit of constructive feedback and, quote, read a hoe. And Detox said that this was her problem with All Stars 7 All Winners because it was always only positive critiques and never anything bad. Although, if any of you have seen my recent interview with Evie Oddly, you'll know that that wasn't actually the case, and Evie spilled some major tea about some harsh, unaired critiques that the judges gave to her on All Stars 7. I'll put a link to the interview in the description, and you should go and check it out because it was actually really interesting. And finally, there's some drama that's unrelated to Roscoe's, but it happened recently, so I wanted to mention it. And it involves Kim Chi calling out Eureka. What happened was that about a week ago, Kim Chi posted a tweet which it looks like she may have now deleted, but I found a copy of it on a Reddit thread. And the tweet said, "A queen has decided to tell a fabricated story about me and my character on a podcast. Little does she know I have the receipts and witnesses. You messed with the wrong bee. See y'all tomorrow and no, this is not a joke." And people were trying to figure out who Kim was talking about and whether it was actually a joke or not. People then theorised that Kim may perhaps be referring to Eureka because she had recently been on the Very Delta podcast with Delta Work and her episode was about to come out the next day. The next day when the podcast episode was released, it seemed like this theory might be true, because on the podcast, Eureka told a story about Kim and said that a few years ago she had, quote, the biggest fight with Kim, and Eureka said that she was, quote, so peed at her. Eureka explained that she had travelled to do a gig with other queens, but her luggage got lost on the flight, so Eureka had no clothes. And Kim was one of the other queens who was also at the show, and Eureka asked Kim if she could borrow some of her clothes. Apparently Kim said that she didn't have anything that would fit Eureka. But on the podcast, Eureka said, quote, "This is when she was going through her era of I'm not a big girl." And when Kim said she didn't have anything in Eureka's size, Eureka apparently then said to Kim, quote, "That's delusional." Eureka then said that she was slimmer at the time anyway, presumably inferring that she and Kim were a similar size. But Eureka said she also felt like it was, quote, hateful, because Kim and her are sisters and they were on tour together, and Kim wouldn't lend her any clothes. So apparently Eureka got upset about it and said, quote, "Okay, well F you, girl." Eureka said she also got into a big fight with Bob the drag queen because Kim Chi was mad at Eureka. So apparently Bob came to Eureka and tried to tell her how, quote, wrong she was. But Eureka said that she was not in the mood, and she also had a fight with Bob and said, quote, "F you too," and told Bob to get out of her dressing room. But Eureka said she's cool now with both of them, but it, quote, took a minute for her and Kim Chi to reconcile. And then someone on Twitter posted a photo and said they think they found the event that Eureka was referring to, and the caption said, "Mind you, these are the clothes in question." Kim Chi also tweeted saying, "Hello at Very Delta Pod, can I come on as a guest next week?" But it looks like this seems to have been deleted. However, after Eureka's podcast interview came out, it seems that people then started discussing Kim Chi's size because she was the topic of the fight, and Kim Chi's weight has been a topic that's been discussed by some people in the fandom for a few years. And Kim then tweeted the next day saying, "The amount of body shaming I've received in the last 24 hours over someone's falsely embellished story is actually wild. I didn't want to air out my personal struggles, but I actually suffered from depression and leg injury and have gained a lot of weight. I am doing much better now, getting back in healthier habits and routine. I hope you folks aren't this cruel to fat people in your real daily lives." And several queens such as Bianca Del Rio and Candy Muse commented with their support for Kim Chi. And it doesn't look like Kim Chi or Eureka have said anything further about the situation since then. However, it should go without saying that it's never okay for people to comment on someone's weight or body shame them, and so this is a good reminder to please be respectful to the queens and don't be hateful. There is also a little bit more unrelated drama to do with Eureka that happened after this as well. So it seems that in the past there have been some allegations that Eureka has not paid designers for some outfits that they designed for her. And it seems like this issue has come up again, and a few days ago, a designer called Touched by a Scorpio on Instagram posted an Instagram story. And in the story, they tagged Eureka and called her a thief, and said that she had not paid for 2 costumes that they designed for Eureka last fall for Canada's Drag Race, presumably meaning that Eureka is going to be on Canada vs. the World too. The designer also apparently spilled some more tea about this in the comments, which I found in a Reddit thread. In the comments, the designer said that Eureka was on Canada vs. the World and that she won Miss Congeniality, and she was bragging about it. And she also apparently only wore one of the costumes and said that she shouldn't have to pay for the second one because it wasn't work. And when people asked the designer if they were breaking the NDA, the designer said they didn't care and it was Eureka's fault for not paying. Eureka then responded in a series of Instagram stories where she posted screenshots of conversations that she presumably had with the designer. And it looks like the designer may have threatened to take Eureka to court, and that's the only time Eureka responded. Eureka then posted several other stories with lengthy statements. I won't read them all out, but I'll cycle through them so you can pause and read them if you want. But basically, she was saying that not all Ru girls are rich, and due to her transition and also a relapse, Eureka couldn't work for a while, so she was struggling financially. Eureka also said that she had been struggling mentally and had moved back in with family, but she's not a victim and she's apologetic that her struggles have affected other people. She also posted a photo of her at her niece's graduation and also a photo with a dog, and the caption said, "Reasons to live and gets me out of bed every day." And since then, it doesn't look like Eureka has said any more about the situation. But the designer has since then posted photos of other outfits they made for other queens with the caption "paid in full," which is presumably a reference to the fact that Eureka didn't pay. But other than that, it doesn't look like either of them have talked more about the situation that I could find, so we'll have to see if any further details come out about this in the future. Hello everyone, and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets, and drama. So I'm back for another Roscoe's recap, and this viewing party was for All Stars 9 episodes 2 and 3. And the guests this week were Willem and Scarlett Bobo from Canada's Drag Race. Today we're going to be talking about the rumour that Plastique Tiara spent $250,000 on her All Stars 9 runways, why a designer is angry at Nina West, and why Willem called out Erica Jane from The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and described her as a, quote, diabolical woman who tried to take down a gay designer. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. So they started off by saying that last week at Roscoe's, they meant to watch episode 1 and 2, but they had timing issues, which is why they only managed to watch episode 1. So they said they would briefly discuss episode 2 now, which is the paintball. Naysha started out by saying she thought it was funny that Georgia said that she would pick Nina to cut because she's the one to beat. But Naysha joked and said, quote, "Did anyone get that from that episode?" implying that Nina did not come across as a threat in episode 2, and everyone laughed. Naysha said that Nina is a fierce queen, but, quote, "no one said fashion goddess." Naysha then said it's interesting what we see on TV compared to what the queens get on set, because Nina must be doing something for Georges to keep thinking that Nina is a threat in the competition. And Caramel made the point that perhaps Georges was saying that Nina is going to be good in some of the challenges coming up, such as acting and comedy, although Georges perhaps didn't explain it in the best way. They then went through all of the runway outfits for episode 2, mainly focusing on the queen's self-made outfits, and they all agreed that pretty much everyone did a good job, but they asked whose outfit they didn't like. Caramel said she didn't like Nina's outfit, and when she was asked why, Caramel said everyone else also didn't like it in the room, and the reason was because it, quote, wasn't at All Stars level. Naysha then said that her favourite outfit was also her least favourite in some ways, and she was referring to Gottmik. And Naysha said that Gottmik has some of the most beautiful outfits ever, but Naysha said, quote, "why the F can she not walk in heels?" Naysha then said, quote, "why put on this horrible, crazy high shoe if you can't walk in it? Because now I'm caught up looking at Bambi over here as opposed to enjoying this beautiful garment." Naysha didn't specify which outfit she was referring to, but I assume it was perhaps the one Gottmik wore with the Scream painting on it. Caramel did say that Gottmik did start off more as a makeup artist rather than a performer, so that might be why. Naysha then used Saphira Crystal as an example and said that Saphira sacrifices the fashion part of her shoes so that she can move and dance. They also talked about the fact that some outfits, such as Gottmik's, are really heavy. And Naysha and Batty said that when you do pageants, such as Miss Continental, you also have to wear heavy outfits. But the difference is that for pageants, you often practice wearing the outfit multiple times, whereas maybe on Drag Race you're rushed and only get the outfits right before filming starts, so maybe the queens, such as Gottmik, just didn't have time to rehearse walking in the outfits, so that might explain it. So that was it for episode 2, and they then moved on to episode 3 and Willem and Scarlett Bobo came out. So they asked Willem if she had been watching All Stars 9, and Willem said she'd watched each episode a few times because you watch it the first time at the club and you're a little bit, quote, effed up. And then you watch it a second time to see if you missed anything, and also text all of your friends to find out stuff like did they change their makeup, what happened here, etc. So it's assumed Willem is saying that they were texting people from All Stars 9 that she's friends with. Willem then spilled some tea and said that one of the queens last week was supposed to have a Banksy-inspired outfit for the Drag Imitates Art runway. And Willem said the designer showed her the outfit and it was a Banksy-inspired artwork in a frame and it had a shredder in it, so the painting would disappear at the bottom and get shredded. But for some reason the queen didn't wear the outfit, even though it took the designer 3 weeks to make it. Willem then said, quote, he's very mad at her, he's on her bleep list, meaning that the designer is angry at the queen. They then asked Willem which queen it was, but Willem joked and said it was, quote, Redactatrondra. The audience gasped a bit, and Nasia said, quote, that sounds hard, it sounds brickish, it sounds like Nina, I'm just kidding. Willem then said, quote, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Marina West. And Nasia said that she was right, and Willem didn't really say anything, so it's assumed that she was talking about Nina, although this isn't 100% confirmed. They then moved on to the moment when the queens were discussing who they would be doing for Snatch Game, and both Nina and Chanel said they were doing Liberace. And Willem said she bets that when they had that call with production must have known that they both wanted to do Liberace, and they deliberately said yes because they wanted them to have some drama. Willem also said, quote, they wanted this drama, they're not doing anything to help the girls. Nasia then explained that as part of the audition and casting process, you do have to tell the show who you're going to do for Snatch Game, so they are well aware of who people want to do and whether more than one person plans to do the same character. And for regular seasons of Drag Race, you have to do your Snatch Game character as part of the audition tape and answer a few questions and say a few lines as that character. Other queens have also confirmed this in the past as well. For example, Bob the Drag Queen once did a YouTube video where she reacted to her Season 7 audition tape because she couldn't find a copy of her Season 8 audition tape. And in the tape, Bob did her Snatch Game character, which was Carol Channing, which is what Bob ended up doing on Season 8 along with Uzo Aduba. Back to Roscoe's, and they mentioned that usually if two queens want to do the same Snatch Game character, usually one of the queens will back down and change characters, but Nina and Chanel didn't. But Nasia pointed out that with the walkthroughs with RuPaul in the episode, Nina and Chanel were the only two who weren't shown, and Cara said that she hadn't clocked that. They then talked about Plastique Tiara, who said she was doing Ali Wong as her Snatch Game character because she's personal friends with Ali. But Willem said instead Plastique should have done Constance Wu because, quote, that girl has a reputation for being a bee, and she is. I worked with her. Willem then explained that Constance has been in several things such as the TV show Fresh Off the Boat and also the movie Crazy Rich Asians. But Willem then said that when Constance's TV show Fresh Off the Boat got renewed for a 6th season, Constance was, quote, mad because she wanted to go do a movie. It was very ungrateful. However, in the comments on Roscoe's, multiple people said that the reason Constance was mad about Fresh Off the Boat being renewed was because she accused a producer on that show of intimately assaulting her. In Constance's book, she said she, quote, suffered in silence about it for a long time and feared that she would lose her job if she spoke out. And back when she complained on Twitter in 2019 about Fresh Off the Boat being renewed for season 6, she got a lot of backlash about it and had to leave social media because at the time the abuse allegations were not public, so people didn't know about it. And because of the backlash Constance received at the time, she apparently contemplated taking her own life. I'll link to an article on ABC in the video description about this story if you want to read more about it. They also talked about Georges' character, which was John Leguizamo. And Willem clarified that the character that Georges was doing was not John's character from the movie To Wong Foo, but it was actually a character John did in a show which was a one-man show that John did back in 1993 where he played several different characters. Naysha also said that for anyone who doesn't know, John Leguizamo was doing drag way before To Wong Foo, which came out in 1995, and John is known for doing different characters in drag and he's really good at them. They then watched the Snatch Game and they talked about Chanel playing Liberace, and Caramel said that it reminded her of when Ben de la Creme did Paul Lynde on the Snatch Game in All Stars 3. Scarlett said that she got, quote, pervert from it. And Willem said the voice was spot on Liberace and it gave, quote, creepy uncle molester vibes. And Naysha said it gave, quote, predatory and it's very much like the movie. Just in case you don't know, because I also didn't know this before, but there was a movie called Behind the Candelabra, which came out in 2013, which starred Michael Douglas and Matt Damon. And it's based on an apparent true story from a book of the same name, written by a man named Scott Thorson, who alleged that he began a relationship with Liberace when Scott was 18 years old in 1976, and Liberace was around 57 years old at the time. And Scott alleged in his book that Liberace lavished him with gifts and also got Scott addicted to drugs and was very possessive of Scott over a period of around 5 years. And because Scott was so young at the time, he said he would do anything to please Liberace. And so I think that's what they were referring to at Roscoe's when they were talking about Chanel's Liberace voice. Anyway, back to Roscoe's, and Batty asked if they prefer Snatch Game of Love or regular Snatch Game. And Willem said she prefers regular Snatch Game, but it's also fun to, quote, switch it up so we have something new to complain about, and everyone laughed. When Snatch Game finished and both Kevin and David came out, aka Monet Exchange and Raven, Willem then said, quote, those two nice black guys found love, and people gasped and laughed, and Caramel said, quote, we're keeping that in there. And what I assume Willem is referring to is that it's been a bit of an ongoing topic over the years that people have pointed out that Raven's makeup is very dark, and some people have accused her of doing blackface. And multiple people, including some Drag Race queens, have made comments about this over the years. Going back to Snatch Game, they also talked about Vanjie, who did Cleopatra as her character, and she started off wrapped in a carpet. And no one at Roscoe's knew why she was in a carpet, but someone in the audience shouted out the answer. So, just in case you don't know, there is a legend that said that Cleopatra, who was the Queen of Egypt, hid herself wrapped up in a carpet so that she could meet Julius Caesar in his room, although some historians dispute if this story is accurate or not. And earlier at Roscoe's, they'd been joking that Vanjie didn't seem to know much about Cleopatra. But then Naysha said that it was fierce that Vanjie knew this fact about the carpet and joked that none of the people on stage did, and everyone laughed. They then moved on to the runway for this week, and the theme was a tail and two titties. And when they got to Nina West, no one really said anything, and someone in the audience said they didn't like it. Caramel said she did like it, but Scarlett said it looked like a, quote, science project. Naysha then went on to say something but stopped, but the others told her she had to say it. And Naysha said that Nina has, quote, set a tone, and now every time she comes on the runway, no one likes it. And she said the audience are also really shady at Roscoe's because when Nina comes on the runway, there are, quote, crickets from the audience, meaning silence. And, quote, no one is buying into any of it. Naysha then asked, are Nina's outfits really that bad, or has Drag Race just taught the audience how to react to certain things? And Naysha said we've seen that happen in the past, and others on the stage seem to agree with her. Willem said that Nina's yellow hair from last week needed to be double as big and proportions matter. And she said, quote, your head is going to look like a big old potato if you don't put some effing hair on it. They then talked about Plastique's runway, and they all said how amazing it was that Plastique is probably the runway queen of the season. Naysha then said she heard a rumour that Plastique allegedly spent $250,000 on her runways for this season. Batty joked that TikTok probably paid that for her because Plastique has over 11 million followers on TikTok and her videos get hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of views, so she's probably earning a good amount from it. And Naisha said that that is her job, and so far on the season it does look like she has spent that amount of money because everything is stoned for the gods, the hair is custom, and it all looks sickening. I tried to find to see if there was any proof about Plastique spending $250,000, but I couldn't really find anything. However, we know that other queens have spent a lot of money on Drag Race. In fact, I did a whole video about it which I'll link to in the description. But in an article with Pink News, it was mentioned that Mistress Isabel Brooks apparently spent around $100,000 on her runway looks for season 15. Gothy Kendall had said that she spent the equivalent of $25,000 on UK vs the World 2. And Isis Couture apparently spent the equivalent of $50,000 on Canada vs the World. So we know that the queens often do spend huge amounts of money to go on the show, although $250,000 would be a huge amount and it would probably be the biggest amount ever spent if it's true. Okay, so now let's move on to the Q&A. One of the questions that came up earlier at the viewing party was that they had mentioned Gottmik started off as an assistant for Matthew Anderson. Many of you will know that Matthew Anderson used to be RuPaul's makeup stylist and photographer, and he was featured on the show a few times. But then Matthew apparently had a falling out with RuPaul at the beginning of season 9 and left the show. I have talked about this subject before, and there is also a lot of tea surrounding this story. You can also check out Green Gay's video about Matthew, which is really informative, and I'll link to it in the description. The person in the audience asked a question for Willem, who is friends with Matthew, and the question is, how is Matthew doing? Because Matthew did have major health concerns and other issues over the years, and Willem has talked about this in interviews before. Willem said that Matthew is doing the same as last time Willem saw him, and he is, quote, communicative when you see him, and you can hold a conversation with him if it's something he wants to talk about. Another question was about Willem's Borrowed Blessing Bureau, which is Willem's collection of clothes and other items that Willem will sometimes loan out to other people, but they have to sign the items in and out because they're expensive. And the question was, what was the worst condition an item was brought back in, and who did it? Willem said there was a wig that Simone once wore, but Todrick was the last one who wore it, and when he returned it, there was apparently wig glue all over it. Willem clarified that two of Todrick's assistants took the wig off his head and returned it, so it's not exactly Todrick's fault. But she said that she had yelled at Todrick and he had, quote, atoned for it. Willem also said Todrick is a, quote, nice guy and he doesn't owe her any money, and everyone laughed. And this is presumably a reference to the fact that Todrick has been accused in the past of not paying his workers. Willem also told a different story, which I believe is about Todrick, and she said that he filmed a music video in Ukraine just before the war broke out, and he left a pair of Willem's shoes behind, which she was really mad about. But he gave her a designer jacket instead, and then she stole something from Todrick's closet when he wasn't looking. And Willem said Todrick is still allowed to borrow stuff from her, and for example, in his latest video, he has black and white hair on, and he's wearing two of Willem's dresses. After that, Willem was holding out her phone and presumably reading a text message, and Willem said that she, quote, got some intel that Marco, who is a friend of hers, made Plastique, Gottmik, and Georges' looks for this episode. An audience member then asked if they know if any of the queens passed on being on All Stars 9 and if any of the cast were alternates. Naisha said she doesn't really know about that, but what she does know is that almost all of them, except Chanel and Nina, were asked to do All Stars 8, but when they found out that there were going to be eliminations, they all said no. Another audience member then brought up that Willem has made several comments about Erica Jane, who is on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and they asked Willem if she knew any more details about this. Just to briefly explain, as it is quite a complex story, Erica Jane is on the reality TV show The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and she has been in a lot of legal trouble over the years because her ex-husband Thomas Girardi, who is a lawyer, was accused of embezzling money that was meant for the families of victims of a plane crash. And Erica was involved because people said that the money was put into a company in Erica's name, and they alleged that Erica's divorce from Tom may have been a sham in order to hide assets. And Erica may have been involved in the embezzlement charges. However, in 2022, a judge ruled that they could not prove that Erica was involved, but the case is still ongoing against Erica's ex-husband. But what Willem is referring to is a different story involving designer Marco Marco. So, Willem once tweeted and referred to an article in the LA Times and tagged Erica Jane in the tweet where she said that Erica had, quote, spearheaded a false/malicious prosecution against LGBT designer Marco Marco. According to the LA Times article, one of the founders of Marco Marco, named Christopher, said that he had designed outfits for Erica Jane going back years, but she always just told them to charge everything to her American Express credit card. However, Christopher is now suing Erica because he alleges that Erica conspired with two of her assistants, as well as an employee of American Express and someone in the Secret Service, and they apparently fraudulently accused Christopher of wire fraud and identity theft, claiming that Christopher put false charges on Erica's credit card of around $900,000. However, Christopher is claiming that this is untrue and that Erica just wanted to get out of paying for all of the costumes that Marco Marco had made for her over the years because Erica and her husband apparently couldn't afford the bill, so instead she allegedly committed fraud. And back in 2017, the Secret Service, who not only protect the president, but they also have power to investigate credit card fraud, apparently did a raid on Marco Marco's warehouse because they said they were investigating these claims of credit card fraud. There's a lot more to this story, and so I'll put a link to the LA Times article in the description, and there's a few other articles you can read about it as well. But what Willem was talking about was specifically Marco Marco suing Erica Jane. Willem said that it's still all under review and that Willem's ex is the lawyer for it. But Willem described Erica as a, quote, diabolical woman, and apparently Alaska once had a gig with Erica, but Erica cancelled it. And Willem said they're trying to, quote, excommunicate this woman from the gay community because she did exactly what her husband did, and when their funds got low, they looked for someone to scam. And Willem described her as, quote, disgusting. Willem also said that apparently some evidence had gone missing from the case and questioned what that means. But Willem ended by saying, quote, ACAB, which is an acronym meaning all cops are bastards, and Willem also said, quote, I don't trust nobody. Then later on, Willem spilled some unrelated tea about All Stars 9 and said that when you see the credits on the show this year, there is no one credited as a wig stylist. And that's because there is no one doing wigs this year, and I presume they mean the wigs for RuPaul, but I'm not sure. Whereas previously there had been someone doing wigs. And Naisha said it was the same on All Stars 8, that there was no one in charge of wigs, and in fact, Raven ended up having to style the wigs they already had. Another audience member then mentioned that earlier in the viewing party, Willem had mentioned that she wrote jokes for Lady Camden for Drag Race, as well as a few others, and they asked what the tea is on that. Willem said that if you watch her roasts on YouTube, you can see a lot of the same jokes that she gave to Lady Camden. For example, when Lady Camden said, quote, I just look at your drag and I think, man. That was Willem's joke that she gave to Lady Camden, as well as many others. And Willem said that all of the queens that go on Drag Race hire queens or other writers to write jokes for them, and they ask queens such as Willem, Jackie Beat or Bianca Del Rio to help them with the jokes. Naisha also said that queens get some people to help them pre-prepare song lyrics, which the queens will take with them to help with the songwriting challenges, so all of the queens get help with lots of different things. And finally, they mentioned the drama that happened on the pit stop last week, which I covered in a previous video, which was when Violet and Trixie said that bearded queens needed to shave. And there was some backlash about it. They then asked Caramel's point of view on this, as she is a bearded queen. Cara joked and said that she thought that it was, quote, disgusting and that she has never done bearded drag. But Cara said she thinks it's just Violet and Trixie's opinion and she doesn't think Violet was being malicious, but Willem said that she was. And Naysha said that there is some truth to that, and some queens don't want to shave their beard because they look, quote, busted as a man without a beard. And Naysha spilled some tea and said that back when COVID was happening, she was also getting ready to compete for Mr. Continental, so she was growing her beard. And so she wore a face mask because she was trying to hide her beard. Hello everyone, and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets, and drama. So, I'm back for another Roscoe's recap, and this viewing party is for All Stars 9 Episode 4, and the guests this week were Roxy Andrews and Detox. Today we're going to be talking about Roxy addressing Detox's comments about her having a phone on the set of All Stars 9, why Detox almost got kicked off Season 5 because of Willem, and Roxy says she thinks that fans need to be nicer about Nina West. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. So they started off by mentioning that Roxy was supposed to be at Roscoe's 2 weeks ago, but she couldn't make it. Roxy explained that she was flying with Delta Airlines and there was a problem with the plane and she would have been late. And she hates cancelling, so she decided to reschedule and come a few weeks later because she loves Roscoe's. Naysha then said before they get into the episode, she asked Roxy how she felt about non-eliminations because Roxy has experienced All-Stars with both eliminations and non-eliminations. Roxy said she was happy to have non-eliminations because as an All-Star, it's nice to come back and show everything you've got. She also said it's really sad when you've been waiting for a queen to come back on All Stars and then they get eliminated in the first episode, and then Roxy said, quote, Serena, and everyone laughed. This is clearly a reference to Serena Chacha, who Roxy competed with on Season 5, and there was a famous moment in Untucked when Roxy said, except for Serena. And it's become a bit of a running joke now that at Roscoe's, Roxy always brings up Serena as a joke. Roxy also joked that someone online tagged her in something that said that Tasha Salad has been on more episodes than Serena Chacha. Roxy then went back to the topic of non-eliminations and said that they, quote, deserve to be there and she loves the charity aspect of it. And Drag Race gives the queens a platform as well as a career, so it's nice to be able to use that platform to give back to charity. Carmel then brought up Roxy's entrance line from the beginning of the season, which was, quote, baby, you can't read the doll, which went viral online. Cara asked Roxy who can read the doll, and Roxy said you can't read the doll because she's not a book. Roxy explained that this line of "you can't read the doll" came from a video that Roxy did years ago where she was ranting about Miss Continental, and so when Roxy was thinking about what her entrance line was going to be for All Stars 9, she chose this line because she wanted people to go and find the video online and watch it. And the video is on YouTube and I'll put a link in the description. Cara then brought up episode 1 and said that Angeria cut Roxy with the ruby snippers, and Roxy said that Angeria is a, quote, smart bee. Cara agreed and said that it was the ball challenge the next episode, but unfortunately Roxy couldn't get a badge, but Gottmik ended up by getting, quote, vengeance for Roxy by cutting Angeria. Roxy then said, quote, I want to spill some tea, but I can't. The others said please do, but Roxy said that this is how they always get her at Roscoe's, but this is about production so she can't. And then Roxy said she can't talk about it because people will post YouTube videos and recaps about it if she does, and everyone laughed. And Roxy continued and said that it was smart of Angeria to cut her, and it's hard to cut someone on the first episode. And Angeria probably saw Roxy as a threat because she'd already been on All Stars twice. Roxy then said, quote, but baby, an eye for an eye. That's how I play the game. You cut me, I'm coming for you. Roxy also clarified that she did not tell Gottmik to cut Angeria. Gottmik made that decision on her own. And Roxy said, quote, we're not playing that game. They then talked briefly about the Snatch game last week, and Roxy mentioned an interesting fact that she had the nose that Gottmik wore as Pell, the Lassie Dog actor. Roxy said she kept that nose and she took it home with her, but she can't find it and she thinks she pinned it somewhere on the wall in her house, but she doesn't know where. They then moved on to talk about this week's challenge, which was that the queens had to give drag makeovers to firemen in pairs and do a girl group challenge. Detox asked how involved the fireman was in writing the lyrics, and Roxy said he was very involved and they split it, all three of them. And they asked the fireman what he wanted his verse to be about, and they wrote the song around him and what he wanted his message to be. Naysha then asked what was the biggest challenge with Roxy's partner, and Roxy said, quote, he was a dude, and Roxy said he wanted to do it so bad, but he was very masculine. Roxy also said he was really trying and they could see that he was pushing himself to his limits, and that's all that matters. Caramel then mentioned that Roxy seemed to have a spare bolt of fabric with her in the episode. Roxy explained that they were asked to bring 3 looks for makeovers that looked alike, but they didn't say anything about what the challenge was going to be in terms of who they would be making over. And on top of that, Roxy brought extra fabric just in case. Naysha then asked how many suitcases she brought to All Stars 9. Roxy said on season 5 they were only allowed to bring 6 suitcases, and on All Stars it was 8, but they couldn't weigh any more than 50 pounds. Detox said on season 5 and All Stars 2 it was 5 suitcases. Roxy then said, quote, these bees that live in LA brought 60-gallon tubs. Roxy then joked that when she showed up, she had the exact amount of suitcases and the weight because she's old school and she always follows the rules. Roxy then said that when they brought everyone's suitcases in, she had her 8 small suitcases that weighed 49.5 pounds each, but then other queens had around 20 of these 200-pound bins. And Roxy said, quote, what the F, what rules did I not get? And apparently they said to her that it is technically only supposed to be £50 per suitcase, but I assume some of them brought a lot more than that and they got away with it. But Roxy said that she, quote, made it work. Apparently they did say to Roxy she can ship whatever she needs, but Roxy just said, give me a sewing machine and I'll make it work. Roxy also said that the sewing machines barely work, and on All Stars 9, she asked them to get her a serger machine from the art department, and she serged everyone's outfits for them. Roxy explained that a serger is a type of machine that uses multiple threads, usually around 3 or 4 at a time, to seam the fabric together and cover any raw edges. Roxy said that she serged all the queens' outfits during the design challenge because she can do it fast, but she also didn't want any of the other queens to mess up the machine that Roxy wanted to use herself later. They then talked about the makeover challenge, and Batty asked Roxy how much time they had to get their makeover partners and themselves in drag. Roxy joked that they got 23 minutes. Roxy then spilled some tea that on season 5, when they had to do the makeover for the gay veterans, Detox wasn't ready. And apparently Detox just said to the producers, quote, well, I'm not ready, what are you going to do, edit me out? I'm not ready, I'll let you know when I'm ready. Detox had apparently only just finished painting her partner's face, but she hadn't done any of her own makeup and told them that they'd have to wait for her. Detox explained that she wasn't the only one who wasn't ready, she was just the only one who spoke up about it. Cara then asked Roxy if there was anyone on the crew at Drag Race that Roxy recognised from her first 2 seasons, and Roxy said that there were a few, including Sarge, who was Peppermint's makeover partner Winter Green on season 9. Detox joked that the only reason she wants to go back to All Stars is to see Sarge again. Roxy then said to Detox, quote, you're going back to All Stars, I don't care what the F you say, you're going back, I don't know when, I don't know how, and the audience cheered. Batty then mentioned that Detox had said 2 weeks ago at Roscoe's that she wanted to go back to All Stars. Roxy then said that she had heard about that, and Detox then said what else Roxy had heard about, and Roxy said, quote, I heard a lot. Roxy then said, quote, we had our phones. And I assume Roxy is referring to the fact that at Roscoe's 2 weeks ago, Detox had said that Roxy, quote, snuck a phone in with her on All Stars 9. And this was picked up by multiple people on social media, such as a Reddit thread, and also a YouTube video which talked about it. And then a few days later, I also talked about it in my Roscoe's recap. Detox then said she didn't even remember saying that at the viewing party because it wasn't a big deal. And Roxy made a joke about YouTube videos that say things like, quote, Roxy reveals secrets about her phone, and this was a bit of a running joke throughout the viewing party. Roxy then explained that on All Stars 9, it got to the point where the queens said to the producers that the queens have their trusted circles, and the designers and the queens know that they're filming All Stars, and they know that they're not allowed to say anything, and they're all adults, so they said they can be trusted and, quote, just give us our phones. They also said to the producers that they could trust the queens because they came back to All Stars and they know the rules, and what difference does it make if the producers hold the queens' phones for 6 to 7 weeks? They're still going to talk and live their life regardless. So apparently they did give the queens their phones on All Stars 9 and they were, quote, very nice, and it seemed to work out. And Roxy hopes it will work out for other future seasons of All Stars as well. There was then a VIP member question, which was about what the queens took to the set with them, such as journals. And then Batty asked the queens if they took anything from the set. Because Naysha has previously said that she took a lot of stuff from set, and Naysha joked that she, quote, mopped the set. Detox said she stole a lot of stuff, including a sewing machine and some pillows on season 5. Detox said she, quote, didn't give an F, and when the producers asked her what she was doing, she told them she was stealing a sewing machine, and the producers laughed and thought Detox was joking, but Detox just walked over to her luggage bin and just put the sewing machine inside. Detox also stole one of the mannequin heads with the long necks, and she joked that she was just so mad, presumably after her elimination, and she just walked around and picked up lots of stuff to steal. Apparently Detox lived so close to the set of Drag Race, she could practically see her apartment from the set. And in the first hotel they stayed in on season 5, Detox's hotel room had a balcony, but the door had been dead-bolted shut, and so Detox joked that she would just look out of her hotel room window at her apartment and feel sad. Naysha then added that in the hotel rooms, the peephole on the door had tape over it so you couldn't see out of it, and the doors also had tape on them as well. Naysha also added that on All Stars 8, she and Jessica Wilde were next to each other in the hotel, and if they both opened their windows, they could lean out and talk to each other. Roxy then said that all the new seasons of Drag Race should definitely not have their phones, and it's like a type of initiation or hazing. Detox agreed and said that all the queens should have to go through what they went through. Naysha agreed and said that queens will find a way to use their phones if they want to, and Naysha told them that she needed her phone to pay her bills, but that was a lie. And so Naysha would ask for her phone, go on Venmo, but then in the memo section she would write a whole story such as, quote, girl, I just got eliminated, F this bleep. Naysha explained that the production assistants are supposed to be looking over your shoulder to see what you're doing on your phone, but she would just ask them a question and, quote, pretend you're interested in what's going on with them as a distraction so you can then text people when they're not looking, and everyone in the audience laughed. Roxy said that back on season 5, there was no Cash App or Venmo, and production would have to take the queens to the bank so they could pay their bills. Naysha mentioned that there was a season that started this trend where all the queens would go out together, and Detox said it was season 4. And apparently the queens all went to Starbucks together one day, and they ran into Michelle Visage, and they would also go to the pool together. Detox then said, quote, Willem ruined it for us all. Detox also said that Willem almost got her kicked off season 5. Apparently what happened was that Willem, along with Vicky Vox, who were all part of the girl group DWV with Detox, they came to Detox's hotel room during the first week of filming season 5 because it was Detox's birthday. And they were running down the hallway of the hotel where the queens were staying, presumably looking for Detox's room. And then the next day, when the queens got to set, Detox was taken aside into the gold bar, and all of the senior people at World of Wonder were there. They asked Detox if she had anything to tell them, and Detox said she thought that they were coming to give her a birthday cake. They then said to Detox that Willem and Vicky had showed up at the hotel last night, and if Detox had anything to do with that, then Detox would need to pack her bags and go home. Detox said that she replied by saying, quote, get that F word on the phone right now, and everyone laughed. Roxy added that on All Stars 9, because they had their phones, the queens tried to order alcohol on DoorDash to the hotel, but the PAs would block them from getting it. They then moved on to the moment where Roxy and Vanjie won the challenge, and everyone clapped for Roxy. And after they watched the lip sync, Naysha asked what was up with the coat that Roxy was wearing at the beginning of the lip sync. Roxy explained that because the queens didn't know if they would be lip syncing each week or not, and they only had a limited number of lip sync outfits with them, they wanted to keep their outfits a secret. So Roxy used a leftover piece of white fabric that they got given during the design challenge in episode 2, and she made a cape that episode to hide her lip sync outfit, just in case she was not lip syncing and she wanted to wear the outfit again in a future episode. Caramel then asked Roxy if she thought that Nina West needed did all of those reveals last week in the lip sync. Roxy said that the way it looked on TV was different than how it looked in person, and Nina only struggled with 1 or 2 of the reveals, but the rest were funny. And Roxy hates that they didn't show what was written on each of Nina's reveals, and Roxy said, quote, "I thought Nina did a great job in that lip sync." No one in the audience really said anything, and Roxy then said, quote, "damn," implying they were being shady, and people laughed. And Roxy added that she loves Nina and she's a great queen. Nation made the point that they talked about this last week and said that some queens, such as Nina, are perhaps received differently by the fans because they only see what is shown in the edit, whereas the queens may have a different experience in person. And Nasia asked if Nina is being portrayed accurately. Roxy said that Nina is an amazing queen and she's been doing drag for a long time and she's raised literally millions of dollars for charity. Roxy then said, quote, "I think I saw what Nina had put on one of the posts. You know, we all make choices." Just in case you don't know, what I assume Roxy is referring to is that before All Stars 9 happened, Nina received a lot of criticism online because she had previously commented on an Instagram post by comedian Amy Schumer that was reportedly anti-Palestine. From what I can gather, Amy Schumer had posted a few things on social media that were derogatory towards Palestinians, and Amy got a lot of backlash about these posts. And Amy talked about this backlash in an interview with Variety. But Amy later deleted those posts and then posted something a bit more mild. Nina then commented on that last post and said, "We love you, Amy." And Nina was then labelled as a Zionist. And after that, in a lot of the social media posts about Nina, people in the comments were calling Nina a Zionist. And it's unclear if Nina knew about the previous more extreme posts that Amy had written, but Nina received a lot of backlash because of this. I couldn't find a lot of official information about this story, so I'm just going on what I could find on social media, but if there's anything I missed out or got wrong, please let me know. But going back to Roscoe's, and Roxy said she's been on the other side of this, and no matter what you do, the fans will try and be upset with you and come for you. But you just have to, quote, "live your life and know that you didn't do anything wrong if that's how you feel. And if you did, then say something on it, but I don't know, it's hard to talk on it." Roxy added that for Nina, as far as being a friend, a queen, and all the charity work, Nina is, quote, "sickening," and, quote, "you'll need to respect her," and then they had a round of applause for Nina. Then Roxy joked and said, quote, "now her runways," and everyone laughed because they had previously made some jokes about Nina's aesthetic, but Roxy said she was kidding. Roxy also said Nina looks the best this season that she's ever looked, and it shows that you never stop learning or evolving, and the audience was really silent, so Roxy said they were being shady. Roxy said that Nina should get credit for winning Snatch Game, but also there's so much crazy stuff happening in the world right now, you should just enjoy the show. They also brought up that Roxy got her second badge this week after Nina gifted her a badge at the beginning of the episode. Roxy said what they didn't show in the episode was that last week in Untucked, and also at the beginning of this week's episode, Roxy said to everyone that she wanted to earn her first badge, so she wasn't asking anyone to give her a badge, but she's thankful for Nina for giving her one anyway. They then watched Untucked, and there was the moment where they made balloon animals for the queens, and Roxy said that that segment went on for 45 minutes and she really just wanted to get out of drag. And Roxy joked that although the balloon guy is really sweet, she was, quote, "sitting on my D" and just wanted to get out of drag, and it was taking too long to actually make the balloons and she wanted to speed things up. Roxy then joked that she wanted to say, quote, "tell me what you would have made me," and everyone laughed. They then moved on, and Nasia asked Roxy how many of her outfits she made for All Stars 9. Roxy said she made all of them apart from 2, and she's not going to say which ones they were, but she paid $12,000 for them and said, quote, "I could have made them for nothing." The audience gasped a bit, and Roxy said it's no shade to the designers, but she was just so busy, that's why she got people to make 2 outfits for her, but she could have just made them herself. She also said that the designers tend to charge Drag Race queens more money than queens who aren't on Drag Race, or sometimes they just refuse to make outfits for Roxy because they know that she sews. And Nasia agreed and said that she got a quote once for $500 more by a designer than a friend for the exact same outfit who wasn't on Drag Race. Okay, so moving on to the Q&A, and an audience member said that we saw on All Stars 9 that Roxy has been helping people a lot during the design challenge, and this is new for her compared to season 5, implying that Roxy didn't really help people before. And the audience gasped a bit, and Roxy joked and started taking off her earrings as if she was going to fight. Detox then put her hand up and said that this is completely false, and that just because you don't see it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Detox went on to say that the reason they didn't show Roxy helping people on season 5 was intentional. The audience member then mentioned Roxy and Jinx on season 5 and how they showed Roxy not being helpful to Jinx, but Roxy asked what the actual question was. The audience member said that they forgot the question because Roxy was reading them, but then they said what they meant was, does Roxy think that they're now showing who Roxy actually is on this season? Roxy said she's a very helpful person and she will always help people like she did during this season in the design challenge. Roxy then said, in terms of season 5 with Jinx, Roxy was stressed as it was her first time on Drag Race and she wasn't really in the space to help anyone. But Roxy said she understands what the audience member was trying to ask and that the edit is now showing Roxy in a more accurate light. And finally, Detox said that she is Roxy's, quote, biggest cheerleader, and they've been friends for 20 years, and Detox is so happy that people are finally getting to see that Roxy is kind and funny and smart, and she's being celebrated this season, and everyone cheered for Roxy. Hello everyone, and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets, and drama. So, I'm back for another Roscoe's recap, and this viewing party was for All Stars 9 Episode 5. Today we're going to be talking about a queen who allegedly stole money from Drag Race and then never showed up, the queens reveal how production instigate drama between the queens, and how production may have inadvertently sabotaged Plastique and Roxy during this week's lip sync. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. And please take a moment and make sure you're subscribed to my channel because it does make a huge difference. If you don't subscribe, Tatiana would say choices, and if you do subscribe, Tatiana would say thank you. So, Vanjie was running a bit late, and Mrs. Kasha Davis said that it had been a while since she was at Roscoe's. And one of the last times that she was there, which was at DragCon for the premiere of All Stars 8, apparently James Mansfield, quote, got mad at Kasha and Kasha got in trouble. Naysha did say that she would get Kasha to tell that story later, but they never got around to it. However, at the premiere for All Stars 8, Naysha and Kasha did say that they both thought that James deserved to be in the bottom in episode 1 rather than the two that were in the bottom, and they kind of implied that James was being difficult on set. So I assume that that might be the reason why James got mad at Kasha after that Roscoe's episode came out, because of what Kasha had said about James, although this is just an assumption and has not been verified. Naysha then asked Kasha how she was enjoying All Stars 9 so far. Kasha said she liked that there were no eliminations and she loves the charity aspect of it. But she said she's having a hard time with the drama about the badges and she, quote, doesn't believe it, and that the drama, quote, seems a little forced. And Carmel said that because there are no eliminations, the show has to do something to try and create this kind of drama and tension, and Kasha agreed. And Kasha joked that, quote, not everyone is a great actor. Vanjie then arrived on stage, and Caramel asked Vanjie how she has been enjoying the season so far. Vanjie said she really likes it, and Naysha asked how different it feels between a season with eliminations and then now without eliminations. Vanjie said she liked having no eliminations, and she joked that if she had been on a previous All Stars, the queens would probably have voted her off because they think that she, quote, lives lavish. And so she's glad that she waited for this All Stars so that there's no eliminations. Vanjie also said that they were going to, quote, backdate the girls that were going to be there. And I assume that what Vanjie meant was that some of the queens on All Stars 9 were supposed to be on previous seasons, but I assume some of them turned down the opportunity because there were eliminations, although this is just a guess. Vanjie then said she wanted to set the record straight about the money that the queens got this season, and they didn't get the money until halfway through the season. Although Vanjie didn't say any actual numbers, Naysha had previously stated that the queens got a $25,000 stipend to put towards outfits, and then they got a further $50,000 as an appearance fee to be on the show. And from what Vanjie said, it sounds like the queens got the $25,000 stipend before the season, but they didn't get paid the $50,000 appearance fee until partway through filming. And Vanjie said this is because, quote, some of the girls won't show up. Naysha then spilled some tea that on her season, presumably All Stars 8, a queen got cast on the season and took the money, but then the queen just didn't show up and she, quote, stole the stipend and then ghosted the producers. Naysha then said that allegedly she got cast right after this happened, or in other words, Naysha was a replacement for the queen that ran off with the money. And at previous Roscoe's viewing parties, Naysha did say that for All Stars 8, she was cast quite late in the process and only had a few weeks to get ready compared to everyone else, so this does make sense. Naysha did not reveal the name of the queen who allegedly stole the money, but later at the viewing party, someone in the audience put forward the name of a particular queen, but Naysha said that she would not reveal who it was because it's not her place to say. There also seem to be several other queens' names that have been suggested on social media as well, but because all of this is circumstantial and not proven, I'm not going to say any of the names. They then moved on, and Caramel then read out a VIP member question for Naysha and Kasha, which was, now that All Stars 9 has no eliminations, do they regret doing All Stars 8? Naysha joked that they got, quote, gooped, bamboozled, effed, we got the bleep end of the stick. Kasha said that she would have loved no eliminations, and she loves the idea of competing for charity, but she's thankful that she had the opportunity of All Stars. Naysha agreed and said that it, quote, puts you back on rotation, and with the queens, you're on a season, you work a lot, and then the work slows down, so you go back for an All Stars and then the work picks back up again. But the problem with eliminations, according to Naysha, is not so much the show, but the fandom, because the queens get judged based on when they get eliminated, and queens who are early outs don't get followed as much on social media, which affects their careers. Naysha even shared a personal story which happened to her, which was that she contacted Murray and Peter Present, which is a large events company that does a lot of drag-based events and tours. And apparently Naysha asked if she could be part of one of their tours, and they told her that because she was a first eliminated queen on her season, and she didn't have enough followers on social media, she could not be on the tour. And Naysha made the point that not following the queens on social media and judging their drag solely based on where they place in the competition is not only mean, but it also actually really affects their careers. So make sure you follow all of the queens, regardless of where they ranked in the competition. They then watched the part of this week's episode where the queens had to film their own real estate commercials. Kasha made a comment about Roxy's so-called Tina Turner wig and said it was lovely. Naysha then asked Vanjie about the wig she was wearing and asked what she was originally going to do with that wig because it fits so perfectly with the character of this skit. Vanjie joked and said, quote, well, gag on this, that was Nina's. Everyone then laughed, and Vanjie said that she said to Nina, quote, Nina, give me one of them ugly wigs you've been wearing. Apparently, Nina said, quote, I've got just the one, and she pulled out that wig, and it seems that it was the same wig that Nina was going to wear for one of her previous lip syncs. They then talked about last week when Roxy and Vanjie had to snip someone. Caramel said it seemed that Roxy was the one who made the decision on who to snip. Vanjie said it was true, but it was a good excuse for Vanjie to get out of choosing someone because Roxy, quote, had unfinished business with Angeria. And because Roxy and Vanjie were in a team that week, Vanjie just said that Roxy could decide. Naysha asked Vanjie if she thought that Angeria was genuinely upset by that, and Vanjie said she thinks that Angeria was upset, quote, every time she got the scissor with me and her. Vanjie also said, quote, I ain't never been snipped yet, or ever, I don't know. and everyone laughed because it sounded like Vanjie may have accidentally given away a spoiler, although this wasn't confirmed. They then moved on to the runway this week, and the category was Day to Night Reveal, and they went through each queen's looks and whether they liked it or not. When they got to Nina, Kasha jokingly stood up and walked off stage, and everyone laughed. Kasha then came back and said, quote, "It was terrible." But Kasha clarified that she is friends with Nina, and she had spoken with Nina about this outfit, and quote, "Nina agrees that it was not good." Kasha also said that she asked Nina if she made this outfit, or did she bring it with her, and apparently Nina just said, quote, "Oh, you shady bee." Kasha then joked that maybe this is why she was booked at Roscoe's tonight, because both she and Nina, quote, "had horrible runways." Naysha followed this up by saying that the fashion this season is on another level and that Nina's just isn't quite measuring up, and on a regular season it would be fine. But this season, other queens such as Plastique and Gottmik are just on a different level, so it's really hard to compete with that. They then moved on and talked about the fact that Vanjie and Roxy had a bit of drama in the workroom earlier in the episode because Roxy was saying that Florida isn't country like Texas is, and kind of implied that Vanjie and Angeria had copied their group in terms of doing country characters. Vanjie clarified that they were given the folders for the commercials, which told them what they should do, and they just had to fill in the blanks. And for the Florida one, it said that they should do country characters from the Everglades, a bit like Ginger Minj. And the folder for Texas had a similar prompt. So that's why Vanjie kind of snapped a little bit when Roxy accused them of copying, because actually they were both just following the brief that was given to them in the folders. But also, Vanjie knew that if they kept talking about it, the two groups would end up being compared, so that's why Vanjie was trying to avoid talking about it, but then Roxy brought it up again. They then watched the commercials, and Caramel said that Nina and Chanel's group, as well as Gottmik and Georges' group, didn't seem to get as many laughs as the other groups did, and is that how it was in person? Vanjie said that Nina and Chanel's commercial was, quote, "effing long," and in person it was so much longer than what was shown in the edit, and they had to cut it down. They then moved on, and Caramel said that one of the VIP members had a question, which was, is the rumour true that Vanjie was the only contestant who didn't have a charity picked when they came to set, and the producers had to make her pick? Vanjie said that absolutely is not true, and that when they called her to ask her to be on the season, they told her that she could pick any charity, and Vanjie picked the ASPCA straight away. They then watched the judges' critiques, and Kasha said that it was a little, quote, boring that they never give negative critiques, and Kasha likes hearing the negative critiques because then they know what they need to improve. And Naysha added that there are no eliminations this season, so they could at least be honest with their critiques because it doesn't really matter. Vanjie said she was trying to remember if they did give negative critiques or not, and Vanjie said, quote, "You know Michelle," as in, you know what Michelle is like. But according to Vanjie, they did give some negative critiques, but they weren't that harsh and it was more just like constructive feedback. Naysha said she thinks that it was Raja that changed that on All Stars 7 because apparently Raja, quote, snapped back at Michelle after she criticised her, even though it wasn't shown in the episode. And after that, the judges were apparently more careful with what they say. They then talked about the moment when Georges got upset on the runway because she felt like she had let herself down this week. Vanjie said that there were other times that queens cried, but for some reason they didn't show it. For example, when Gottmik gifted a badge to Vanjie last episode, Vanjie apparently cried, and RuPaul tried to help Vanjie express what she was feeling. But Vanjie was crying because she couldn't believe that even though everyone was gossiping about Gottmik and Vanjie being in an alliance, Gottmik still decided to give the badge to Vanjie. Naysha then shared that on All Stars 8, during the first episode when they had to vote for who to eliminate, Heidi and Closet was the first queen who had to go and vote. But apparently no one agreed with the bottom two that episode, and they all thought that it should have been someone else. And based on what Naysha has said previously, it's assumed that they all thought that James Mansfield should have been in the bottom that episode instead. Apparently, Heidi was so upset after voting, she came out to the tent area, which is where the queens are held before going into the workroom, and she was, quote, bawling her eyes out and threw a chair. And Heidi said, quote, "Why the F did I sign up to do this? This is so hard, this is stupid. I should never have agreed to do this." And Caramel noted that Heidi clearly was ready to leave from the beginning, because as we know, Heidi did end up leaving the competition a few episodes later. There was then another VIP question, which was why Vanjie dropped the Mateo part from her name and now she just goes by Vanessa Vanjie. Vanjie said it was purely because it was easier for branding and for work. But she clarified that she and Alexis Mateo are cool and there is absolutely no beef between them, and that's not the reason why she dropped Mateo from her name. They then watched the lip sync between Roxy and Plastique, and Caramel said, in her opinion, Plastique won the lip sync. Naysha said that, quote, "A little birdie told her that Plastique knew absolutely none of the lyrics to the song at all." And Roxy also did not know all of the words, and that's why Roxy kept turning around. But she apparently did know more of the words than Plastique did. Vanjie then revealed that for that song, which was Super Freaky Girl by Nicki Minaj, when they got given the song on the iPod and the printed out lyrics, it was not the explicit version with all of the swear words and the N-word. But then, when the actual lip sync happened, they did use the explicit version of the song, even though that's not what the queens had originally been given. Vanjie then joked and said, quote, "Maybe it's good that the B didn't say any of the words," and everyone laughed. Vanjie also said that there was a bit during the song when Plastique was on the floor and Roxy pointed at her, and they both laughed because they knew that neither of them knew the words. Naysha said that on a regular season, both of them would have gone home because RuPaul hates it when the queens don't know the lyrics. Vanjie defended Roxy a bit and said that she did know some of it, but she didn't know the second verse, which was the fast bit. And the queens were all apparently listening to the song in the van, and no one really seemed to know the words because the song is very fast. Naysha also said that at one point during the lip sync, Plastique wasn't even trying to lip sync at all. And Vanjie said, quote, "At least move your mouth." And so it sounds like production may have messed up the queens a bit by using a different version of the song than the version that was originally given to the queens. Although this is just an assumption based on what was said, and it's not clear if this was on purpose or inadvertent. They then moved on to the Q&A section, and one question was for Vanjie, which is, why is her bestie Gottmik not doing the All-Stars tour? What I assume they're referring to is that there is an official All-Stars tour operated by Voss Events, and it seems that Gottmik and Nina are the only two not on the tour. Vanjie said she didn't know much, but there were, quote, a few queens who were still negotiating things about the tour, and apparently some flyers for the event had been put out before they had finished negotiating. But in terms of Gottmik, Vanjie said, quote, "She might join, she might not." But the queens were all negotiating their own personal business endeavours, and there were clearly conflicts with the scheduling. Although Vanjie said it was only Gottmik who wasn't doing the tour. However, from what I can see on the Voss Events website, Nina is also not listed on the tour, so we'll have to wait and see what happens with this. And then finally, an audience member said that they worked in reality TV production for around 12 years, and on those shows, the producers would run around and say things to the contestants to stir up drama and get people to argue, and they asked if the same thing happened to the queens on Drag Race. Vanjie said that at this point, the producers can do what they want, but we all know how it works, and so, quote, "If you take it, you the fool." Naysha said she understands why production does that, because you have a room full of big personalities, but some people are very quiet and, quote, "squashed down and don't want to talk." Naysha gave the example that on season 8, Bob, Thorgy and Acid Betty were all big personalities and were friends from before, and they would all talk a lot. And so production had to, quote, "encourage everyone else to talk." And they would go to queens such as Naysha or Layla McQueen and say, quote, "we need you to talk," so that they could capture it on camera. Vanjie added that sometimes the queens might say something in the confessionals about another queen, or they might be whispering outside behind another queen's back. And then the producers would come in and ask the queens questions about it to check if the other queens had heard what they had been saying about them behind their backs. Kasha said that when she was on Drag Race, they once came over to her with a note that said, quote, "do that again, but make it more intense." And she also said that sometimes during lunch, producers would try and, quote, get stuff going between the queens, and it was up to you if you decided to run with it or not. Vanjie said that by now all of the queens hear the gossip and tea about what happens on set, so the queens are on guard when they're on the show now, and they're more careful about what they say. Naysha finished by saying that now on Drag Race, the producers have a banner on their phones with instructions, and they just hold up their phones, and the banners will say things like, Naysha, ask Vanjie about her father. And it's their way of not interrupting filming, but still getting the queens to ask certain questions or talk about certain topics. Hello everyone, and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets, and drama. So, I'm back for another Roscoe's recap, and this viewing party was for All Stars 9 Episode 7, and the guest this week was Chanel. Today we're going to be talking about Chanel's opinion on Gottmik being accused of stealing jokes from someone else, an update about the accusations that Chanel stole money from an audience member's purse, and Chanel reveals some backstage tea about an unaired moment from this week's episode involving RuPaul on the main stage, and why Chanel was, quote, done and wanted to leave the stage. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. So they started off with Naysha asking Chanel if she's been watching this season of Drag Race. Chanel paused and everyone started laughing, and then she said, quote, no. Chanel explained that when they were doing press week for this season, she had to watch the first episode twice, and that was, quote, really difficult for her because she does not like to watch herself on TV at all. And she also sees the clips that come out on social media, but the episode that they watched at Roscoe's is the only episode that she's going to watch of the show other than the first episode. Chanel did say though that filming the show was an amazing experience, but she was, quote, obviously frustrated. Naysha said she wanted to move on, and she said, quote, let's just get this out of the way, plagiarism, and everyone in the audience gasped and some people laughed. And it was clear that Naysha was referring to Gottmik in last week's roast challenge, when Gottmik was accused of copying jokes from a comedian named Nikki Glazer. I did talk about this in my Have Your Say video last week, so check that out if you want the full story, and I'll put a link in the description. Naysha went on and said that this is, quote, nothing new, and everyone has ghost writers and everyone gets help before they go on Drag Race. But Naysha said, quote, however, the jokes were exactly the same, from the same person, from the same roast. Naysha then added that the way she feels about it is that it was, quote, wrong, period, and Naysha asked how the others felt about it. Chanel said she had no idea about any of that when they were on set filming the roast, but she had heard that Gottmik and Nikki are friends. Chanel also said she saw the clips that people had posted online showing Nikki and Gottmik's jokes side by side, and that, quote, it is what it is. In Chanel's opinion, it's very easy to watch Drag Race and think, quote, I could do that. But in reality, each episode is about 30 hours of filming footage which gets edited down. And for the roast, each queen did about 5 or 6 minutes of jokes, but it got edited down even more. But Chanel said about Gottmik, quote, I'm not mad at her for it. Chanel explained that she loved Lisa Lampanelli back in the day, who was also famous for doing the Comedy Central roasts. And Chanel said that she used to do some of the, quote, stupid bleep on stage that Lisa did. And Chanel loves Gottmik and they talk on the phone every other day, so, quote, F it is what it is. Naysha agreed and said that a lot of queens have ghostwriters and get other people to write their jokes. And Naysha joked that with Gottmik, you could just see those jokes beforehand because the person she got them from, in other words Nikki Glazer, also has a platform where she told the jokes before. So Naysha, quote, totally gets it, and she thinks that it could have been done, quote, a little bit differently, but she's also not mad at Gottmik. Naysha then said that a lot of comedians have a team of writers who help them to write their material anyway. It's not just one person who writes the material. And it's the same that you can give someone a dress and makeup, but it's up to them to execute it. Naysha also joked that Gottmik, quote, took or borrowed the jokes, but she still had to execute them. Chanel said that she is a host for a living and has been doing it for 29 years, and she reads people all the time in her shows. But when you're on Drag Race and you get up on stage, it feels like, quote, you've never spoken a word in your entire life. It's the scariest, crazy bleep. Chanel also explained that the queens practice their roasts over and over again, and they even practice with the producers. And although they didn't air this in the episode, when Chanel went out for her roast, she apparently started welcoming the audience and talking to them. And she realised that 2 minutes had gone by and she was just, quote, shooting the bleep with the audience, and she hadn't said one word about any of the queens. And she had wasted all of that time talking to the audience. And so it's so easy for your mind to just go blank when you're up on stage. So, in Chanel's opinion about Gottmik, quote, if she wanted to recite word for word her bleep, go for it. They then moved on, and Nasia said that Chanel has now been on 3 seasons, which include eliminations and non-eliminations, and she asked which does she like the best. Chanel said that she was the first ever queen to appear on the show and walk into the workroom. And she also saw a meme recently online that said that she is the only queen to have competed in all 3 decades of Drag Race, and everyone clapped for Chanel. Chanel explained that on season 1 they had no idea what they were doing and there was no blueprint to follow. And all they got was a 1-page letter that said, quote, bring 18 of your favourite drag looks. Chanel also said that she didn't even send in her audition tape, her mother did, and so Chanel was in a beauty supply store and they called her and told her that she was the first queen to get cast on the show, but she was really surprised about it. However, Chanel said that on season 1, she was, quote, frustrated and upset because she felt that everything she had done in her career up until then and everything that she brought with her to the competition, the judges didn't like, so she questioned why she was even there. And then for All Stars 1, Chanel said none of them had any idea that they would be put in teams, and Chanel said that, quote, no one gives a bleep about that season, and, quote, it wasn't a good season, even though the cast was great. However, what Chanel did like is that they had to go out onto Hotel Boulevard in one of the episodes and make people do things like crack an egg over their heads, and Chanel said that she won that challenge. Chanel then joked and said, quote, in fact, it's still the only thing I've ever won on the show. And some people took this to be a potential spoiler that Chanel will not win any badges on All Stars 9, although this is not confirmed. Chanel also shared that she was asked to come back for other seasons, such as UK versus the World, but she turned it down because the timing wasn't right. But she also, quote, didn't have the drive to want to go back. And one of the main reasons is that Drag Race has evolved so much and Chanel is very old school, so Chanel felt that her drag wouldn't have a place in the Drag Race forum of today. But then when she found out that All Stars 9 would be a charity season, that was the only reason she decided to say yes, because she feels, quote, truly blessed by all of the opportunities that she's had in her career, and she wanted to give back to the community. Caramel then said that Chanel is the blueprint for Drag Race, and her drag is definitely appreciated, and even years later, people are still trying to do Chanel's level of drag, and everyone clapped for Chanel. They then moved on, and Caramel said that now we're seeing that there is some, quote, gameplay involved with the queens snipping each other and also the badges. And Cara asked Chanel when she felt that that started happening. Chanel said, quote, from the word go, and everyone laughed. But she clarified that it wasn't necessarily in a bad way, and at the end of the day, it's a competition. And although they think that it is a bit like, quote, RuPaul's best friend race this season because they all got on so well, maybe from around episode 3 is when the queens realised what was happening. And part of the beauty of drag is that it is, quote, catty and sassy, but there's always love underlying it. They then moved on, and Chanel said that she helped a lot of queens over the season, such as Angeria, Nina and Roxy, and she would help them with their wigs and their outfits. And for example, she even helped Roxy Andrews to paint her face in one of the episodes. However, Chanel joked that they'll never show any of that on camera because it would look like, quote, favoritism. They then moved on to this week's runway, which was Widow Weep For Me, and everyone cheered for Chanel's look. Chanel shared that actually the category that the queens were originally told was, are you a widow weeping or a weeping willow? but they changed the name of the category when the queens got to the show. And that can change the meaning behind some of the queens' looks, but Chanel said that although they didn't show it, this was one runway where the judges really did not like what Chanel was wearing. And apparently Michelle said that the colours were, quote, pretty, but it's a Marie Antoinette style and they've seen that, quote, many times. Chanel then spilled some tea and said that she really wished they had showed this but they didn't, but during the judges' critiques, RuPaul spent at least 20 to 30 minutes, quote, going off on Chanel, but not in a bad way. And in the episode we saw that Chanel was, quote, down and frustrated, and she did not think that she did well in this week's challenge. And Ru spent a full 20 to 30 minutes on the main stage trying to build Chanel up and tell her not to worry about it. But apparently Ru just kept going on, and then finally Ru just looked at Chanel and said, quote, do you understand what I'm saying to you? And Chanel apparently just replied by shrugging and saying, quote, meh, and everyone laughed. Apparently Angeria, quote, just about hit the floor when Chanel said that, and after the queens finished filming that day, all of the queens went up to Chanel and said that only she could get away with saying that to RuPaul. Chanel said she really wished they had aired that moment because it was priceless. But Chanel added that she was, quote, so effing done that day, and although her challenge was not the best, she didn't think that it was the worst thing ever. So when Ru was saying all of that to Chanel, she just thought, quote, girl, bye, I'm tired. Because when you're on the runway, you film the judges' critiques for about 5 hours, and the judges talk to each queen for about 25 to 40 minutes each. So if you're at the end of the line, you're standing in heels and a corset for hours on end. So by the time they get to you, you just want to get it done quickly. But looking back at the situation, Chanel can now see that Ru was just trying to help her, but she was just so frustrated in that moment, and it's hard to be the one person in the competition who hasn't won anything. They then went through each queen's runway look, and when they got to Angeria, Chanel said that originally Angeria's collar wouldn't stay up, and she wasn't sure what to do. So Chanel wired the collar for Angeria, and everyone cheered for Chanel. Chanel explained that she had brought some heavy-duty floral wire with her to the competition, and so when Angeria didn't know what to do about her collar not staying up, Chanel started wiring 3 or 4 of the sections of the collar and it worked. So Angeria did the rest of the sections, and that's why her collar was able to stand up. They then moved on and started talking about the acting challenge, which was this week's Maxi challenge, and Naysha asked how much fun Chanel had doing this scene. And Chanel said, quote, I didn't, and everyone laughed. Chanel then said that out of all of the challenges on this season, this was, quote, the most frustrating. The reason was that Chanel was given a scene inspired by Joan Crawford, but Chanel does Joan Crawford all the time in her shows. So she wanted to do something different so she could show off a different side of her. And so she was, quote, really bummed when she got Joan Crawford. Also, Chanel said her frustration with this scene was that she didn't know if she was supposed to be like Joan Crawford or just a, quote, peed off bee with a Joan Crawford-esque vibe. But Chanel said that it was her own fault and she was just overthinking it. And for example, Chanel joked that there was even one take they did where RuPaul slapped her and Chanel's head went in the wrong direction. And she was convinced that they would use that in the edit and she would look, quote, effing stupid, but they didn't. And in fact, during the judges' critiques, RuPaul said that she felt like she, quote, didn't connect with Chanel during the scene, and when she slapped her, Chanel went in the wrong direction. Chanel also said that some of the writing for the queens' scenes was funnier than other queens, and she implied that some queens got way better jokes than other people did. The episode then ended, and they were talking more generally, and Naysha mentioned that Chanel was on season 1, and Naysha has said in the past that she also auditioned for season 1. And I've mentioned this before on my channel, but Naysha said that originally the show was supposed to be that the queens auditioned with a sidekick. Chanel confirmed that this was true and said that the original premise of Drag Race was that queens and their costume designers would be competing in pairs against other drag queens and their costume designers. Chanel said that she was going to compete with her friend and costume designer called Coco Vega, and Coco was so excited to be on TV, and she went and got a nose job and got her teeth fixed. And then, about 4 or 5 days before filming started, the show changed their mind and said that they only wanted the queens to compete on their own. And in fact, that's why some people have theorised that some contestants, such as Victoria Porkchop Parker, did not do very well in the competition because they originally thought that they wouldn't need to sew or create any outfits because they would have a costume designer with them. Naysha said that she auditioned with designer Josh Wanaponte, who is quite a well-known designer who has designed many outfits for queens on Drag Race. And Naysha said that they called the other person the quote sidekick, and you could pick what skill set you wanted the sidekick to have. For example, if you're not good at designing or sewing, you could bring a designer as a sidekick, or if you wanted a sidekick who could do your hair and makeup, you could. Chanel then revealed an interesting fact that Josh Wan was the designer who made her promo look for All Stars 9. And the outfit was huge in person, although you can't tell on camera, and the bottom of the outfit was about 8 foot across. And so it cost Chanel $1,000 to ship that costume because it was just so heavy and big. Also, Chanel said that on set they have a snack table, and Chanel kept stress eating so many Kit Kats and other snacks all the time. And this meant that Chanel put on around 15 pounds during filming, and Chanel's promo look was supposed to be her finale look, but because she had put on weight, the outfit wouldn't fit. And she asked Roxy and Plastique to help her fit into it, but she just couldn't. But luckily, there was a runway category that got cancelled last minute, and the outfit for the runway was a stretch fabric, so Chanel was able to use that outfit for the finale episode instead. And that meant that the outfit that didn't fit was then able to be used later on for Chanel's promo look. They then moved on to the Q&A section, and an audience member said that so far they haven't shown any negative critiques, but they know that Michelle probably did give some negative critiques, and they asked what was the shadiest critique that Chanel got from the judges. Chanel said that on the firefighter makeover challenge that she did with Angeria, Michelle told them that the three of them looked like, quote, the Golden Girls. And Michelle said that Chanel's makeup looked like Tammy Faye, and people in the audience gasped a bit. And I assume Chanel is referring to Tammy Faye Mesner, who was an American televangelist who had her own TV show called the PTL Club, and she was known for having quite an eccentric style. There was then another question, and an audience member brought up the accusations that were made against Chanel that she stole money from a fan at a drag brunch, and how did that affect her? Just in case you don't know, back in August 2022, Chanel was accused by a fan that she stole money from her purse during a drag brunch show in Las Vegas. There was some video footage that showed Chanel performing, and during the show, Chanel went around in the audience and collected tips from people. And at one point, she picked up a woman's purse and took out some money and then walked away, but most people said that they thought it was a joke. However, after the video footage came out, the audience member in question posted several videos on social media where she said that Chanel had stolen about $700 from her purse. Chanel posted a video on her Instagram saying that she did not steal that much money from her purse and it was only a few dollars. And it was a joke that she had been doing with audience members for years when people give out tips to the queens. But Chanel said that she had apologised to the audience member and they had refunded her whole group's tickets, which was over $1,200. According to an article in Entertainment Weekly though, the audience member refused and got her lawyers involved and tried to sue for $6,000 to cover the cost of a cabana that she had reserved at the hotel, and she said that she was filing a police report. Later, Voss Events, who organised the drag brunch, said that it was supposed to be a comedic bit that Chanel was doing, and she only removed $2 from the lady's purse, not $700. And this was corroborated apparently by the security footage and also by other witnesses. They also said that they apologised to the audience member and they agreed that Chanel shouldn't have touched her purse, but they pointed out that the audience member kept posting social media posts that were fueling hate, and they asked her to stop posting about it, but she said no. There are many more details to this story, and Bussy Queen did a very comprehensive video about this subject with lots of video clips and receipts, so I'll link to that in the description if you want to find out more about it. But anyway, back to Roscoe's, and Chanel was asked about how this situation had affected her and if there was an update about the situation. Chanel said, quote, "The case was dropped because the woman was a liar." Chanel said, quote, "I really don't need this bee's money." Chanel also said she can't discuss the full details of the case, but the lady had been, quote, "on the hunt for her own reality show." And the police got involved when she accused Chanel of stealing money from her purse, and later she was forced to take down all of the social media posts. But Chanel said that when this happened, it sucked because Chanel lost $18,000 worth of bookings because there were queens who believed this story, and so they cancelled bookings that Chanel was supposed to have later on because they, quote, "didn't want to work with a thief." Chanel finished by saying, quote, "I am the most trustworthy person that there is. I am a business owner. I don't need to do all of that." And Chanel said she can't change what people think about her, but she can put her head on her pillow at night and know that there are, quote, "angels sitting above my head," and everyone clapped and cheered for Chanel. Hello everyone, and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets, and drama. So, I'm back for another Roscoe's recap, and this viewing party was for All Stars 9 Episode 8. And the guests this week were Scarlet Envy and Angeria Paris Van Michaels. Today we're going to be talking about Angeria revealing an unaired harsh critique from Michelle on All Stars 9, Scarlet addresses rumours of behind-the-scenes tension on UK vs the World 2, and Naysha reveals that the other queens were banned from talking to her during the promo on her original season. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. So they started off with Naysha asking Angeria if she always knew that she wanted to come back for All Stars, or was it a decision that she juggled with? Angeria said she always knew she wanted to come back, and in fact, Angeria was asked to do All Stars 8, but she said no because she felt like it was a bit too soon, but she told the producers to keep her in mind for the next All Stars. And then later, Angeria sent a message to the producers and told them not to forget her for All Stars 9. And Angeria said, quote, "I believe closed mouths don't get fed, closed books don't get read," and everyone clapped. Angeria followed this up by saying that there are so many queens who say that they want to go back to All Stars and they complain that they don't get asked. But then Angeria always says to them, quote, "Well, did you express interest?" And she joked that there are now 50,000 Ru girls, so you can't expect them to know you want to come back to All Stars unless you tell them. They moved on, and Naysha said that because it's a non-elimination season, there's little drama, and the only drama there has been is about snipping, especially Angeria and Roxy snipping each other. Naysha asked Angeria if she considered snipping Roxy again rather than Gottmik. Angeria said she knew she wasn't going to snip Roxy because Roxy had the opportunity to snip Angeria that week when Roxy turned around and turned her back during the snipping and landed on Angeria, but she changed her decision. So Angeria knew she couldn't snip Roxy because it would have been a, quote, "real ass hoe move," but everyone would have lived if Angeria had snipped Roxy and it would have made great TV, but she just couldn't do it. And the reason she chose Gottmik to snip was because Gottmik had snipped Angeria in the past, but also Angeria did take on board what everyone had been saying about snipping someone with the same number of badges so that they can't catch up. And apparently everyone had been talking about this strategy all day, which is why Angeria ended up doing it. Naysha then asked Angeria if she really believed in this strategy or was it full BS. Angeria said she didn't think it was full BS and she did agree that it's better to stop someone catching up because it gives you a better chance of being in the final 3. And if someone is already in the lead, snipping them won't stop them being still in the lead. Angeria also said when Plastique originally told everyone about this strategy, Angeria had honestly never thought about it that way, and she thought that it was, quote, kind of smart. There was then a VIP member question for Scarlett, which was about her time on UK vs. the World Season 2, when Hannah Conda picked Scarlett's lipstick, and Scarlett didn't seem to believe Hannah's reasoning for picking her lipstick. And the question was whether Scarlett wanted to, quote, swing on Hannah in that moment, or in other words, hit her. Scarlett laughed and said, quote, I think I got exactly what I wanted out of that moment with Hannah, and they all knew what was actually going on, and Scarlett just wanted to put that out there. But no, she never thought about punching Hannah in the face. Caramel then asked Angeria if she wanted to, quote, swing on Roxy, when Roxy originally landed on Angeria to snip, because a lot of people were saying that they didn't believe that Roxy didn't know where the queens were standing in the lineup. Angeria said the only reason she thinks Roxy did know where the queens were standing was because Angeria was, quote, screaming and yelling at Roxy, saying, quote, I'm right here, don't do it. And it was implied that Roxy must have heard where Angeria was standing because she was yelling so loudly, but Roxy still maintained that she didn't know where anyone was standing. They then moved on and they asked Scarlett if she would ever come back for another All-Stars, but Scarlett said that people who come back more than 3 times usually don't get that well received. And so far, Scarlett feels like she's been well received on all of her seasons, and she doesn't want to ruin that. Patty then joked that what Scarlett was really saying was that, quote, UK versus the world was rigged. Nasia then said, speaking of that, there was a VIP question which was, can Scarlett spill any tea on that clearly rigged finale of UK vs. the World Season 2? Just for those of you who didn't watch UK vs. the World Season 2, Marina Summers from Drag Race Philippines was a favourite to win and she had done very well throughout the competition. But she was eliminated in the finale episode and didn't make it to the final 2, which a lot of people were surprised by. And the final 2 were Hannah Conda and Tia Kofi, with Tia ultimately winning the season. Scarlett said, quote, I was shocked, I'll be honest. I'm not a producer, so I don't know what was going on, but I will say Miss Marina Summers has a very bright future ahead of her, and everyone cheered. Scarlett also said she thinks that this will help Marina and everything happens for a reason and that Tia is a great winner. But in that moment, quote, my jaw literally hit the ground. Nasia then asked if they filmed alternative outcomes for the winners, or did they only film one version? Scarlett said they filmed 3 different outcomes and one of them was a tie, but she did say that they all thought the tie was going to be the version that would air, but it didn't. Angeria also said she thought the tie would also win because she did binge queens for that season, so she got to watch all 3 of the alternative endings. Just for anyone who doesn't know, Binge Queens is a web series on Wow Presents Plus and YouTube where Drag Race queens watch episodes of Drag Race and give their commentary about it. And Angeria was on Binge Queens for UK vs. the World Season 2, and from what she said, they got to watch all 3 of the alternative endings, even though only one of them got shown in the final edit, and Angeria said she had to give 3 different reactions for all 3 endings. Scarlett was surprised by this and said that when she did Binge Queens for All Stars 7, they didn't get to see any of the alternative endings. And in fact, they didn't even get to see the finale episode, and the producers just told them to clap and say, quote, congrats to our new queen, but they didn't even know who actually won, they just blind reacted. They then talked about this week's main challenge, which was a design challenge, and Angeria said that she changed her costume multiple times and her first outfit was too small and she didn't have enough fabric to make it bigger, so she had to make something else instead. Nasia then spilled some tea about the fabric and said that the stairs in the workroom where RuPaul enters from, behind that door there are 2 directors' chairs that are usually where RuPaul and Raven sit, and they have a monitor on the other side and they watch what's happening inside the workroom. So if you're having any conversations inside the workroom, RuPaul and Raven may be watching and listening to it. And a lot of queens don't know about this, including Angeria, who said she'd never heard that before. Naysha also said right next to the two directors' chairs, there's a huge bin of fabrics, and quote, there may have been a contestant or two who have gone to that bin and got more fabric. And because what happens is that the entire Drag Race set goes into storage after each season, so any fabric that gets left over after each season also gets put into storage and gets put into that huge bin of fabric. And Naysha joked that she may have accidentally, quote, effed it up for other queens now because they might now take that bin away. They then watched the runway for this week and everyone cheered for Angeria's look. Angeria explained that she made that outfit in about 2 or 3 hours because she was so, quote, indecisive and kept changing her ideas and wasting time. And so she just ended up deciding to make a silhouette that she'd made before. Batty joked that Angeria also made Chanel's outfit too, but Angeria clarified that all she did was sew the front and back of the dress, but Chanel did everything else. They then talked about Plastique's look and how amazing it was, and Naysha said that she was gagged when Michelle mentioned the lining of the outfit. Naysha then explained that the judges are sitting so far away from the stage, there's no way that the judges can see that amount of detail from so far away. But what happens is that because the queens are mic'd, the producers are always listening. And so if a queen says something in the workroom, the judges will get told to talk about it in their commentary. Naysha gave an example and said that when she was on the show, backstage, she once said, quote, this hair, I'm not sure it's giving rock, I feel it's giving Dolly Parton. And then later on the main stage, Michelle's exact words were, this hair is giving Dolly Parton. And Naysha joked and said, quote, you effing be, and that they're always listening. Angeria then said, quote, you do have to be careful about what you say. Naysha explained that on All Stars 8, Candy Muse came up with a trick that she taught to the other queens, which was, if you wanted to say something without the producers hearing, the queens would just keep tapping their mics on their outfits while they were speaking because it distorts the sound. But the producers got angry and yelled at the queens to stop doing it. There was then another VIP member question which was about the waiting period between filming a season and then waiting for the season to premiere, and is it different for the Queen's original seasons versus All Stars? Angeria said it was different for her because on season 14 they only had to wait for about 6 months between filming and airing, whereas for All Stars 9 they had to wait about a year. And Angeria joked that she, quote, almost forgot that she was on the season because it had been so long. And on her original season, you get to keep the momentum because they filmed the promos about 3 months after filming, and then 3 months later, the show aired. Whereas this time for All Stars 9, they didn't film the promos until almost a year later, so you, quote, kind of lose the momentum and you pick it back up. Naysha then explained how the promos work and said that how it works now is that you film the season and then production comes up with a theme and then months later they'll tell the queens what the theme is and the budget, and the queens then come and film the promos. So for All Stars 8, they wrapped filming in August and then in November they shot the promo. However, when Naysha was on her original season, which was season 8, the way it worked was they filmed the first episode and Naysha was eliminated. Then, the very next day, they shot the promos and the Meet the Queens. And at that time, Naysha was the only queen who had been eliminated because they'd only just filmed the first episode the day before. And during the filming of the promos, Naysha was in the same room as all the other queens, but the queens were not allowed to talk to her because she had been eliminated. Then, during the Meet the Queens, they asked questions like, quote, tell us, why do you win? And Naysha knew that she had been eliminated, but she had to answer all of these questions. And she had been, quote, bawling her eyes out hours before, and now she had to serve charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent. Naysha also said that back in the day, the show used to do things like that, and they would just kind of figure out what they were doing with the promos because they were still figuring out how to do things. And in fact, when they were doing the promos for season 8, Acid Betty thought that Naysha was being, quote, bitter because she wasn't talking to anyone. But then Naysha turned around and told her that she actually wasn't allowed to talk to any of them because she had been eliminated. Angeria said she thinks that a lot of international seasons still do it that way, and then Scarlett said, quote, "Do you want to know?" and everyone yelled yes. Scarlett said for season 11 and All Stars 6, they shot the promos about a year after filming the seasons, and it was, quote, "very glamorous and it felt like they were at a resort, and they also had a famous art director, and they asked what music the queens wanted to play, and they had a fan going and it's your moment and your fantasy." But then for UK versus the World, she was really excited because they were going to London. But what actually happened was, the day after they filmed the finale, they told Scarlett that she was shooting her promo the next day and her call time was 4 a.m. And then she had to get straight away on a plane. So Scarlett joked that she basically ended up getting on the aeroplane in her promo gown, and she asked if she had time to shower and they said no, and she ended up washing her face in a cold sink and then went straight to the airport. So it was literally the opposite experience of how it worked on the US seasons, and on top of that, it was also Scarlett's birthday on that day. They then moved on to the audience Q&A section, and an audience member asked if there was any behind-the-scenes drama on UK versus the World, because it always seemed that there was some underlying tension between Scarlett and the other cast members. Scarlett joked and said, quote, "Is it me? Am I the drama?" Just to quickly touch on this because I thought it was interesting, this line is clearly a reference to Scarlett's All Stars 6 Meet the Queens, where she said, "Is it me? Am I the drama?" and this moment went viral online. Scarlett did talk about this at one point during the viewing party and said that this line was not planned and she didn't realise it was going to go viral. She explained that the reason she said that was because they filmed the Meet the Queens for All Stars 6 before the season aired, so Scarlett didn't know how she was going to be edited or what was going to be shown. But during the filming of the Meet the Queens, the producers asked Scarlett if she was the villain of the season, and Scarlett was genuinely not sure why they asked her that question, and she thought maybe they were implying that they were going to edit her to be the villain. So when she said, quote, "Is it me? Am I the drama? I don't think I'm the drama. Am I the villain?" She was genuinely asking those questions to the producers because she felt like they were implying that Scarlett might be edited to look like the villain because she hadn't seen the edit. And I thought this was just an interesting insight into this viral moment. Anyway, back to Roscoe's, and the question was whether there was any backstage drama or underlying tension between Scarlett and the other queens on UK versus the World too. Scarlett said, quote, "Yes, there was tension, I guess. I don't really quite know why." She then added that it's been announced that they will be doing a Bring Back My Girls reunion at DragCon LA, so maybe they'll revisit that question then. Another audience member then asked Angeria what was the harshest unaired critique that Michelle or another judge gave them on All Stars 9. Angeria said that Chanel may have already said this last week, which she did, but during the makeover challenge with the firefighters, Michelle apparently said that they were, quote, "moving like senior citizens." And Angeria thought it was funny, but apparently Chanel was, quote, peed about it, and they also told Chanel that she looked like Tammy Faye, and apparently Chanel said that she was, quote, over it. And even their makeover partner was apparently upset about that critique, and him and Chanel were just sitting later on the couch looking really annoyed. Angeria also added that what Michelle said was that they were supposed to be pop stars, but they were actually giving, quote, pop stars at the nursing home. And finally, an audience member said that a lot of fans are complaining that Untucked is boring now because there's less drama. And so what do the queens think they should do to make it better? Naisha said that it's the show's fault, honestly, because, for example, on All Stars 8, they did an unofficial reunion on set during the Fame Games episode where they did the talent show. And all of the queens came in and sat on the couch, and it was, quote, drama and arguing. Apparently, Alexis Michelle confronted Candy Muse about lying and said to her, quote, "I should have chosen you because you're an effing liar." And they all went back and forth, arguing and shouting, but they didn't show any of it in the episode. And Nasia said in her opinion the reason they didn't show any of it is because nowadays, when there is drama on the show, the queens get a lot of hate online, including death threats. And the show has to be careful about protecting the queen's mental health, which is why they're now careful about what they show. Scarlett then finished by saying that the fans have a lot of power, and even if the fans think the show isn't listening to their feedback, Scarlett said they definitely are listening. And so if you have an issue with anything, make your voice heard and they probably will listen and they may change things. Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So, I'm back for another Roscoe's recap, and this viewing party was for All Stars 9 Episode 9, and the guests this week were Plasma and Kennedy Davenport. Today we're going to be talking about Kennedy calling out production for being shady on her seasons, Plasma spills some behind the scenes tea about how the Rusicals work, and Kennedy reveals an unaired moment from All Stars 3 that she wished had been shown because she got backlash about it. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. So they started by watching this week's episode, and during the break, Kennedy said, quote, "Fun fact, I was an alternate for this," meaning All Stars 9. Plasma then said that they then must have decided to, quote, "send her up to Canada instead," because Kennedy was recently announced as being part of the cast for Canada vs. the World Season 2. And Kennedy said, quote, "Yeah, because they knew I was effing mad." Kennedy explained that they told her that she was not going to be on All Stars 9, and then they invited her to do Canada vs. the World, but Kennedy originally said she would only do it if she had a guarantee that she would be on. Kennedy then said, quote, "I'm not going through all of this bleep and then for you to tell me I'm a damn alternate, just in case someone drops out. That's some bull bleep." They then moved on and watched more of the episode, and Plasma asked Kennedy who she is rooting for in this season. At first, Kennedy pretended to fall asleep, as she had joked earlier that this season was boring, and everyone laughed. And in general, this Roscoe's had a very chaotic energy, and both Plasma and Kennedy made a lot of jokes throughout the viewing party. But Kennedy continued and answered the question and said that she was rooting for Roxy, but then she said she's rooting for everyone. She then joked and said that everyone is doing, quote, "so well," and that the judges are only saying good things. And she used her fingers to indicate quotation marks as if she was being ironic. Caramel then said that the reason is because it's a charity season, but Kennedy replied saying, quote, "Yeah, and that's bull bleep." Kennedy then said that if she had been on this season, they definitely would have had something negative to say. There was then a VIP member question for Kennedy, which was, when she went to film Canada vs. the World, what was one of the biggest culture shocks? Kennedy said that people are making out like they went on tour, and then she said, quote, "We were stuck in a room for 6 weeks. The culture? I mean, snow." And everyone laughed. Cara then asked if the hotels are different to the ones in America, but Kennedy said they're the same. But on Canada vs. the World, they had a suite with a little kitchen as well, and Kennedy would cook food for the other contestants as well as the crew. They then brought up this week's challenge on All Stars 9, which was the Rusical, and Plasma said she had not watched last week's episode, but she had seen something on Twitter about this week's episode, but it was more, quote, "to do with a technical event rather than someone skillfully executing the challenge. So I'm excited to see if we're relying on props and costumes or if we're here to bring it like professionals." Plasma then explained that on her season, they only had 9 hours and 1 rehearsal to learn the whole Rusical. Kennedy agreed and said they really don't get much time for these things. She then said, quote, "Bring me back for when we do the Rusical for Canada." Some people in the audience gasped a bit, and they joked that that was a spoiler that there was a Rusical on Canada vs. the World too. Kennedy then said, quote, "True fans know that it's a Rusical every season. That's not a spoiler, bleep," and everyone laughed. They then watched the part of the episode on All Stars 9 when the queens recorded their vocals for the Rusical. And Kennedy said, quote, "But can I just say something shady as far as production was concerned?" Kennedy then went on to say that on her season of Drag Race, they never showed her recording her stuff, and presumably she was referring to recording vocals for the music challenges. Some people in the audience gasped a bit and started talking between themselves, and Plasma asked if that was really true. And Kennedy said, quote, "Yeah, remember, think about it, they never showed it, especially season 7. Kennedy explained that she never had any problems singing, but they never showed her going through those motions. They then watched the Rusical for All Stars 9, and some people clapped. Cara asked if people enjoyed it, and some people said yes, but it was quite a muted reaction. Batty then said that it sounded like the audience didn't really enjoy it, and Cara said that in her opinion it was good, but we've seen better. Kennedy was quiet and had an expression on her face, and Plasma pointed at her. They then asked Kennedy what she thought. And Kennedy said, quote, "Girl, that was up the devil. I had nothing to do with it. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, and if it would have been me, I would have had a real problem doing this challenge." Presumably this is because this Rusical was called Rosemary's Baby Shower, and the theme was quite dark and horror/demonic themed. But people laughed when Kennedy said this, so it may have just been a joke. They then went through each queen's performance in the Rusical, and when they got to Chanel, Plasma said she liked it and that Chanel was channeling New York and Barbara Streisand, and she was really committed to the role. But Kennedy said, quote, "Not good enough for no badge though," and people laughed and were gagged a bit. Kennedy also added that the final edit of the queens dancing together at the end was, quote, "sickening," and she said that we all know that, quote, "folks were messing up." And they kept panning to different queens and not showing other queens, and that, quote, "when they pan it, you know they're messing up." And Kennedy then said, quote, "BB Sahara," but no one really caught that Kennedy had said that, so they moved on. But it was presumably insinuated that Kennedy was saying that on All Stars 3, BB must have messed up in one of the challenges, but they panned the camera to avoid showing her messing up. But this is not confirmed and is just supposition. Plasma then joked about the wig that Nina was wearing for the Rusical and that it was too small for her head. Plasma then said, quote, "Wait, did I ever tell you about the wig that Wigs and Grace styled for me for the Rusical?" And just to explain in case you don't know, Wigs and Grace is a well-known wig styler who makes a lot of wigs for drag queens, including many drag race queens such as Kim Chi, Bob the Drag Queen and Eureka. Plasma then explained that there is a picture of this wig deep on her social media, and this is the wig that she was originally given for her role as Mariah on The Sound of Rusic, but it was a bowl cut and it was huge. Plasma joked that she asked production if Wigs and Grace was there, and they said no, and Plasma replied saying, quote, "Good, because this wig is in disgrace. I cannot wear this." Plasma explained that she had to move all over the stage and they had her flying around, so the wig was just too big and she couldn't wear it. So the next day production gave her a, quote, Lisa Rinna wig, and Plasma said, quote, "That'll do." They then watched the runway for this week, and the category was Bring Back My Pearls, and they discussed the Queen's looks overall and who they thought was going to win the episode. When they asked Kennedy, she said, quote, "I was going to say Nina, but that goddamn runway. She makes me so mad. You be so goddamn good, and you get your ass on that runway and look a goddamn mess. I just want to push her off stage." And everyone laughed. Kennedy then joked that Nina has got, quote, "no taste." And Cara agreed and said that on this particular season, when everyone else does have taste, and if you don't, it just stands out like a sore thumb. Kennedy then said, quote, "Not to say, to be fair," and there was a pause, and everyone started laughing because Kennedy was kind of backtracking a bit. Kennedy then continued and said that she has liked some of Nina's runways, but they've all been the same note. Kennedy also joked that people thought her runways were bad on her seasons, so Nina can join her club. They then watched the judges' critiques, and Batty asked what they thought of the judges' critiques, and she said that she wanted to start with Kennedy. Everyone then started laughing because they knew what Kennedy was going to say because she had a look on her face. Kennedy eventually said, quote, "What is the purpose of critiques if everybody is in world peace?" She also said that even Michelle is letting up and she doesn't get it, and not everything is great. And she said that she doesn't give a damn if it's for charity, quote, just tell the truth, that was a mess what you had on, baby. She also explained that even though there are no eliminations, they should still keep the dynamic as if there were eliminations, because it still challenges the queens to pull out all of the stops. And if everything is always positive and they always tell the queens that they love them and that they're proud of everything they do, it, quote, makes it boring because we know you're lying. Kennedy also made the point that Michelle always says she hates leotards on the runway, and there were 3 leotards tonight on the runway and she didn't say anything about it. Plasma agreed and said that as drag queens, they're artists and they're always evolving, and just because you're on All Stars and you have a big fan base, it doesn't mean that the queens are immune to critique. Plasma also said, quote, why aren't we dissecting the cream of the crop to see which cream tastes the sweetest? Kennedy then said, quote, well, they tore my ass up. They didn't like bleep that I had on, so I can relate. And it's assumed that she was referring to All Stars 3. And Plasma joked that on All Stars 3, the judges must have looked at Trixie Mattel and loved her, quote, Barbie cosplay. Kennedy seemingly agreed and laughed and started choking a bit and said, quote, yes, oh my god. They were then talking about going back for All Stars, and Batty said it must be hard because on All Stars 9, the queens know that they're not walking out with any money specifically for them, it's for charity. And Plasma started making faces while Batty was talking, and then Plasma said, quote, Batty, they got paid big bucks to go on this show. Batty agreed, but Plasma then joked and said, quote, oh, but you're right, they're not there for the money. But it was clearly meant ironically. Batty then said that they're there to get money for charity, and Plasma said, quote, oh, that's right, that's what Plastique is doing. And everyone laughed because Plastique has so far not raised much money for charity because she hasn't won any lip syncs. They then moved on, and Batty asked Plasma if she would ever go back for All Stars. Plasma said that if All Stars called, it would be a, quote, very hard decision because I spent everything I had financially, physically, mentally, psychologically on my first time there. Plasma also said that she was a, quote, shell of a person after her season and she was, quote, done. And she wouldn't change any of it, and she had the most amazing time and she's really grateful for it, but there was a long mental health recovery period afterwards. And for her to go back on All Stars, she would need to be in the right headspace and it would take a, quote, very special circumstance. But she would love to go back if people want to see her back, and everyone cheered for Plasma. They then moved on to the Q&A, and there was a VIP member question which was for Kennedy, and the question was, out of the Canada vs. the World Season 2 cast, who did she get on with the best, and who was the most annoying, and why was it Miss Fiercelicious? Kennedy laughed and then said that everyone on the cast got on really well, and what Kennedy liked the most about Canada vs. the World is that she got to meet queens from other franchises, and none of them were afraid to, quote, give me my flowers, which really validated Kennedy and her drag. But Kennedy said that in terms of annoying, none of them were annoying, but she joked that Miss Fiercelicious was, quote, fierce, and Kennedy loves her, but Miss Fiercelicious was just being her, quote, normal self. An audience member then asked a question about the Rusicals and how much time the queens get to prepare, because the costumes have to be tailored to fit the queens because they're all different sizes, plus they also need time to rehearse. Kennedy said that there is no tailoring, and everyone is given the same amount of time no matter what season it is, and you just have to make it work. Caramel then said that some of the queens have said different things over the years, and some queens get 9 hours, and other queens have said that they had the whole weekend to rehearse. So it varies by season, but the whole cast gets the same amount of time. Plasma added that if there's not a moment that you're rehearsing for the Rusical, then you're in a costume fitting and they're sewing your costumes as you rehearse. Plasma then said that on season 16, they got the Rusical on the Friday, and then on Saturday they rehearsed all day and were in and out of costume fittings, and then on Sunday they had the day off to practice in their hotel rooms. Kennedy then said that they must have really, quote, advanced in that case, because on her season, and it was presumed that she was referring to season 7, she said that no one sewed anything for them. They just gave the queens a list of outfits to bring, and whatever else you had left over, that's what you used. The queens were apparently told that some things would be provided by the show, but the queens were told to bring certain other outfits, and they didn't tell the queens what they would be using those outfits for until they got to set, but they found out that they were being used for certain challenges. And then, according to Kennedy, on All Stars 3, everything that the queens wore was what they brought with them. There was then another question for Kennedy, which was about her experience working on both US and Canadian seasons, and which production did she enjoy working with more. Kennedy said production on Canada vs. the World was the best for her, and they were more validating to the queens, and they were also more, quote, attentive. She then said, quote, they didn't make it seem like we were replaceable. It was also an emotional moment for Kennedy because, quote, you don't realise how you were treated until someone else treats you. And she said that Canada treated her very well, and everyone clapped for Kennedy. Kennedy then said, though, that she doesn't want to knock RuPaul's Drag Race because she's grateful for the opportunities she's had from it, but, quote, personally, we have our feelings. I'm human, we clock a lot of things on and off screen. And even when they're not there, they see a lot of things and they have to adjust to a lot of things as well. And there was a big difference for her between the US seasons and Canada. And Kennedy reiterated that production on Canada was better. And finally, an audience member said that earlier Kennedy had said that they didn't show her vocally recording on her season. And so they asked both Kennedy and Plasma what was one thing that happened on their seasons that they wished got shown but didn't. Kennedy said for her, she wished that they showed more of the final lip sync between her and Trixie on the finale for All Stars 3. The reason is because Kennedy got some backlash about it, with people saying that Kennedy was just doing tricks during that lip sync. But Kennedy said, quote, no B, I lip-synced that whole song. She then added that she wished they had shown the whole song so you could see the whole effect of what Kennedy was doing. And apparently after they were finished filming, they, quote, had to take a break because the lip-sync was so powerful. And Kennedy said even though she won the improv challenge in episode 3, she is still campaigning for them to release the full edit. And that's because they had to do a 10-minute improv, and Kennedy, quote, effed up that whole stage. You think what you saw was funny? It was so funny. And apparently the cameramen and everyone else was laughing, and you could hear them laughing in the headphones, and nobody was holding composure. Plasma said that for her, on the runway for episode 7, which was the flower-themed runway, that was her favourite outfit that she brought with her. And she had a little parasol which she was using like a walking cane, and while she was walking the runway, she put weight on the parasol and the bottom of it snapped off mid-runway while Plasma was walking towards RuPaul and the judges. And Plasma said that she just looked down, thought about it for a second, picked up the dowel at the end of the parasol and just used it to point in the direction that she was walking in and continued walking. They then apparently ran backstage and Plasma told production, quote, I need white duct tape right effing now. And one of the assistants already had some white duct tape with her. And Plasma said that if you zoom in, you can see the duct tape on the parasol. But Plasma said she wished that they had showed that because it was her, quote, funniest non-funny moment. And she felt, quote, untouchable in that episode because that's the episode that she won. Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So I'm back for another Roscoe's recap, and this viewing party was for All Stars 9 episode 10. And the guests this week were Morphine Love Dion and Marina Summers. Today we're going to be talking about some backstage tea about Roxy Andrews refusing a lip sync song, Morphine spills some tea about how lip syncs are filmed on Drag Race, and I'll be talking about some recent unrelated drama to do with Elliott with 2 T's breaking her silence on the allegations against her. Plus, Candy Muse calls out Elliott and provides screenshots of what went down in the group chat. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. So they started watching this week's episode, which was the lip sync Lollapalooza. Morphine said she loves the Lollapalooza episodes because it shows what drag queens actually do for a living, and they should do one every season. Morphine also mentioned that she won the Lollapalooza episode on season 16, and so she won $50,000. Morphine explained that she was so stressed when they filmed the Lollapalooza, and quote, "I won't lie, it was a struggle. I was going through such bad anxiety that day." And Morphine added that she took a Tylenol that day to try and get rid of her anxiety, but it quote, "didn't work." Morphine also joked that her sister, Plain Jane, did so well on season 16 and won 4 challenges, but, quote, "in the end, I won more money than she did," and everyone laughed. They then watched some more lip syncs from the episode, and Naysha asked if this is still the case on lip syncs, but on her season, what they did was, before the lip sync, they played a loud noise, and then there were 3 or 4 beeps, and this acts as a countdown and a cue so the queens know when the music will start. Morphine joked that she wasn't sure if she's allowed to talk about that sort of thing to do with production, but she did confirm that they still do play a cue for the music. And she gave the example of when she lip-synced against Saphira for the win in episode 10, and they lip-synced to the song Made You Look by Meghan Trainor. And that song doesn't really have an intro and just starts straight away, so you need a cue so that you know exactly when the song is going to start, otherwise you'd miss the first line. Naysha also added that they usually play about 10 seconds of the song first, so they can check the volume and that the sound system is working okay before they do the actual lip sync. They then watched the lip sync between Roxy and Georges to the song Holding Out for a Hero by Bonnie Tyler. They then asked who they thought won the lip sync. Morphine said she thinks Roxy won, and although she doesn't think Georges did badly, she felt that Georges' energy was doing another song, and she added, quote, "It's like she was doing Ava Max and Roxy was doing the actual song." Naysha agreed and said this lip sync was so representative of old school versus new school, and that one is performing the song, the other is embodying the song, is feeling it, is making you feel it. Naysha also added that the tricks and splits are, quote, "sickening," and Georges is on a whole nother level. But Roxy was making you feel that song and coming through the screen, and it just shows that you don't need to do all the tricks and stunts to win a lip sync. They also brought up that Roxy chose the song Holding Out for a Hero because it was a tribute to her late drag grandmother who performed that song at Miss Gay US of A. They then brought up another performer named Tandy Iman Dupree, who also performed this song in 2001 at the Miss Gay Black America pageant, and her entrance involved her falling from the ceiling, and she even broke the heel of her shoe in the process. And this clip went viral a few years later and became an iconic performance. Here's a quick clip of it. You may also remember that on season 13, Tamisha Iman mentioned that Tandy was one of her drag children and she sadly passed away in 2005. But going back to Roscoe's, and they then moved on, and Naysha brought up that on season 16, Morphine had said that she knew Maya Iman LePage from before and she had seen her perform and she'd, quote, "given her $1." But Morphine admitted that that was a lie and she actually had never seen Maya perform before, and everyone laughed. They were then about to watch the lip sync between Roxy and Angeria to Groove is in the Heart, and they asked who they thought would win. Batty Davis then said, quote, "It just depends if you're going to pull a plastique and point during the rap." And this was presumably a reference to episode 5, when Roxy and Plastique lip-synced to Super Freaky Girl by Nicki Minaj, and many people commented that Plastique didn't seem to know the words, and during the rap part, Plastique just pointed at Roxy. But when Batty mentioned Plastique pointing at Roxy, Morphine said, quote, "I hate that, learn the rap part." Morphine then brought up the Lollapalooza on season 16, when Morphine lip-synced against Megami to Gonna Make You Sweat, Everybody Dance Now by CNC Music Factory. And during the rap part, Megami brought out a, quote, dumbass puppet and the camera focused on her, whereas Morphine said she knew every word. But Morphine said that later in a live video, Megami admitted that she didn't know the words to the song, which is why she decided to use the hand puppet. Naysha then asked Morphine how it worked with the songs for the Lollapalooza, and did they send them a bunch of 20 songs to learn, or did they just send them the 9 songs that they needed for the Lollapalooza? Morphine said that after they finished filming the season, they sent them the list of all the songs that they needed to learn, and it was the full versions of the songs. But then when the queens got given the iPods with the songs on them, the songs had been cut down to the version that we heard in the episode. Morphine then joked and said, quote, "I learned every single one. I learned the whole rap part. I did my homework and my job, unlike some other girls in my season." Naysha then spilled some tea about the songs for the lip sync assassins on All Stars. Apparently there was one queen who was going to be a lip sync assassin, and they sent her the song to learn for the lip sync. But the queen refused and said she would not do that song because it would, quote, get her together, so she flat out refused to do that song. So the producers apparently asked her what song she would like to do instead, and the queen told them, and this is the song they ended up doing in the episode. Naysha didn't say the name of the queen at first, and then she said, quote, "It was so fierce and it was so sickening, and I'm proud of you, Roxy, for doing that." And everyone laughed and clapped. And then Naysha added that the producers then gave that song that Roxy didn't want to Cameron Michaels instead when she was a lip sync assassin. This is presumably a reference to when Roxy was a lip sync assassin on All Stars 5 episode 3, and she lip synced against Miss Cracker to the song One Last Time by Ariana Grande. Naysha also said that the song was then given to Cameron Michaels. However, Cameron appeared as a lip-sync assassin on All Stars 6, episode 9, and lip-synced against Raja O'Hara. So, from what Naysha has said, they must have kept that song for quite a long time before they gave it to someone else. And that song was Boom Clap by Charlie XCX, and Charlie XCX was a guest judge on that week's episode. So, it's presumed that the song they tried to give Roxy on All Stars 5 was this song, but she refused, so they must have kept it for All Stars 6 and given it to Cameron. And this does somewhat make sense because I seem to remember that when this lip sync between Raja and Cameron came out, most people online criticised the song choice and said it was a bad choice and that it didn't give the queens a chance to really show off their lip syncing skills. Cameron even took to Instagram shortly after it aired to vent her frustration, and she posted saying, "The longer I try to act like it never happened, the longer it's going to take me to get over it. I am going to share my images only because the photographer and the designer deserve recognition for their work. I am hurt, disgusted, and devastated by the entire situation. Call me dramatic, I don't give an F. Every girl looks forward to coming back and having their moment to shine. I feel cheated, and worst of all, I said yes and agreed to it, which is something I have to deal with now and will take me a very long time to get over. If I could go back in time, I never would have stepped foot on that stage. I know my worth and my talent, and I feel like I was used for some quick, cheap storyline. Some queens are comedians, some are models, and some are performers. I am a performer through and through, so to have the one thing I'm actually good at be tainted like this hurts my heart so much. So again, I'll be sharing the looks strictly for those involved in the photo shoot. If it were up to me, they would never see the light of day. All my comments and messages will remain off until I'm back in a good spirits. And F that stupid song. And so it seems that this is probably why Roxy refused to do that song originally, because she knew it wouldn't get a good reaction, and so Cameron got it instead. But I thought this was an interesting piece of backstage tea and does put it into context why Cameron responded the way she did. They then moved on and they were talking about their achievements in drag, and Caramel mentioned that Marina has become a bit of a pop star. Marina explained that she performed the opening number at the Miss Universe Philippines pageant in 2024, and she sung her song I'm a Filipina, which is the song that she also performed on UK vs the World 2 for her talent show. Marina has subsequently said that it's been her dream to be on Miss Universe ever since she was a child, and that she got to fulfill her lifelong dream. And at Roscoe's, she explained that Miss Universe is a big deal in the Philippines, so it was great to represent her country like that. Naysha said that Miss Universe is a big deal in many countries, and it's a huge accomplishment. And Naysha believes Marina is the first drag queen to ever be on Miss Universe, which is great representation, and everyone clapped and cheered for Marina. And finally, they moved on to the Q&A, and an audience member asked if Roscoe's has ever asked RuPaul or Michelle Visage to appear at Roscoe's as a guest. Naysha said she thinks Michelle has been a guest at an event once, and then Sean, who I believe is the manager of Roscoe's, came on the microphone off screen and said that Michelle used to come for some of the charity competitions as well as her book release and several other things, but then her schedule got really busy. Sean then said that with RuPaul, 15 years ago, he used to charge $75,000 just to walk in the door, not even in drag. And so Sean said, quote, "So I can't even imagine how much he is now." And that was it for Roscoe's, because not a huge amount happened in the episode. So now I'm going to move on to a little bit of drama that happened this week to do with Elliot with 2 T's. As many of you will know, and I have talked about this in previous videos, Season 13 contestant Elliot with 2 T's has been involved in quite a lot of controversies since her time on the show. And this has included her fellow castmates such as Candy Muse, Gottmik and Simone accusing Elliot of using racist and transphobic language both on set and after the show was filmed. Elliot has mostly stayed silent about these controversies and has only addressed them in passing. However, Elliot recently appeared in an interview with YouTuber Joseph Shepherd and addressed these allegations. I won't go through everything that was said in the interview, but I'll just go through a couple of the main things that were discussed. So they started off, and Joseph said that Elliot actually reached out to him directly because Elliot wanted to come on Joseph's channel and do an interview so she could address the allegations against her and tell her side of the story. In the interview, they went through some of the main allegations that have been made against Elliot by her castmates, and they even watched some of the video clips of the queens who made these allegations. Elliot said that she didn't really feel very welcomed by most of the cast on season 13, and the only people she has stayed in touch with are Tamisha Iman and Kimora Hall. Joseph showed Elliot a few past social media posts that she had posted that she got criticised for, including one where she posted a car with a license plate that said Trump. And people took this to mean that Elliot is a Trump supporter. But Elliot said she hates Trump and it was just supposed to be a joke, and she thinks that this post may have been before Trump was even running for president. There were also 2 other social media posts, one where Elliot called Caitlyn Jenner Bruce, which people took as dead naming a trans person, and another where she said, "I'm telling you, they cannot sell Black Barbie to anyone." Elliot said these tweets were from at least 10 years ago, and she was just trying to be funny and get attention and was being dumb, and she never meant to offend anyone. They then talked about the comments that Elliot had made about season 13 winner Simone, where she said in a previous video that Simone's drag wasn't, quote, aggressive, and people criticised Elliot because the word aggressive is often used as a stereotype against people of colour. Elliot said that she didn't mean it in that way, and they then listened to Simone and Candy when they were asked about this in an interview, and they said that Elliot hadn't taken accountability for what she said. Elliot said that she had texted Simone many times about this situation, but Simone apparently never responded. And Elliot thinks that Simone knew that Elliot's words had been misinterpreted, but Simone didn't reply back to Elliot. They then watched the clip where Gottmik said on the podcast No Gorge that another queen on the season had used transphobic language on set, including the T-slur, which is an offensive term for trans people. And this queen also used some racist language towards several of the POC queens. Although Gottmik didn't name the queen, in the comments on the original TikTok video, Candy Muse said it was Elliot. Elliott said she would never use the T slur and that she knew none of this until the podcast episode came out, and Gottmik never brought any of this up to Elliott. And Elliott said that she would never want to make anyone feel uncomfortable. Apparently Gottmik was always nice to Elliott, and they even talked at DragCon and they were kikiing. And when Elliott then texted Gottmik about the podcast episode because she was surprised that Gottmik had said all of this, Gottmik apparently didn't give a reason as to why they said this and just said, quote, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know." They then watched a clip of an Instagram live video that Candy Muse posted where she said that Elliott had called her things like, quote, "ghetto," and Elliott had apparently described Simone's do-rag look on season 13 as being, quote, "ratchet." Elliott said she didn't know that those words were offensive and claimed that no one ever called her out about it. And she said that she was uneducated about these sorts of issues, but people should look at her intention and see that she didn't mean it in an offensive way. And Elliott claimed none of her castmates ever confronted her about this, so how was she supposed to know? There was also a lot more that was said in the interview, so you should definitely go and check out the full thing on Joseph's channel, and I'll put a link to it in the description. And in general, some people applauded Elliott for doing this interview and for addressing the controversy. But overall, the interview was not very well received by most people, and the comments on YouTube as well as the comments on wider social media were quite negative, with people saying that Elliott was not taking accountability for her actions, was giving lots of excuses, and had not apologised. After the interview came out, Candy Muse seemingly responded to it on Twitter across several posts. The first post said, "Going on a podcast and asking for an interview 4 years later to make yourself the victim and still not take accountability for the bleep you said and did on set is whack. Joseph, take the L on that whack ass interview. No one told me anything. Babes, there's literal footage of me calling you out in Untucked. Enough with this topic, I'm done beating a dead horse." This was then followed up by another tweet that said, "And since you want to talk about no one called you out, baby, don't even try it, and even after your ass blocked me, I still made sure you were included in the group photo at DragCon. That victim complex is dangerous." Along with this tweet, Candy also posted several screenshots of the season 13 group chat, where Elliott had posted a link to a previous interview she did with the NAACP, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People. And in this interview, Elliott had discussed the accusations of racism. And in the group chat, Elliott had said, "If y'all could share, that'd be great." However, in the screenshots, we can see that Candy replied saying, "Elliott, you haven't reached out to anyone that you've offended on set and or off, not to explain yourself or apologise to your castmates or your fans. I watched the video and you didn't own up to anything, you didn't apologise about anything. I will absolutely not be sharing this video. When you own up to calling me ghetto, Simone Ratchet, using AAVE, which means African American Vernacular English, on set around POCs, and asking some of our castmates what genitals Mick has, you have lost your mind. There is no sense of accountability. I'm not sharing a video where your friends validate your mistakes." It then appeared that Elliott had left the group chat and also blocked Candy on Twitter. Since the interview has come out, Elliott was reached out to by Out magazine for comment, and Elliott said, "By doing this interview, I've taken accountability by addressing everything head on, and I want to rise above this. It's not about being a victim, I've been the target of hate and abuse for too long. This is something that has deeply affected me, and I just want to use my platform to spread love and kindness. At this point, I've apologised to the best of my abilities and even taken steps to educate myself. Every story has 3 sides, my side, their side, and the truth. I genuinely want to move past this. I am not racist or transphobic, and I do not have the ability to be so in my heart. I wish Candy all the best, and I forgive her for all the hurt she caused me. However, my name is spelled Elliott with 2 T's, there are no K's in my name." And just in case you don't understand understand that last part of the quote, this is presumably a reference to the fact that since the accusations of racism came out against Elliot, instead of people calling her Elliot with 2 T's, people started calling her Elliot with 3 Ks, as an apparent reference to the KKK or the Ku Klux Klan, which is a white supremacist far-right organisation. But Elliot and Candy have not said any more about the situation as of yet, so we'll have to see if there are any more developments about this. Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So I'm back for another Roscoe's recap, and this viewing party was for All Stars 9 episode 11, and the guests this week were Thorgy Thor and Detox. Today we're going to be talking about Thorgy Thor telling a funny story about Ellie Diamond being a thief, Thorgy reveals who is the worst queen to work with, and Thorgy spills some unaired tea from her pit stop episode with Trixie Mattel, and why Roxy Andrews was annoyed at Trixie afterwards. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. Also, I'm so close to hitting 110,000 subscribers, so if you're not subscribed yet, please consider subscribing because it really makes a big difference to my channel. Thank you! So, Naysha started off by mentioning the huge Microsoft outage that caused massive disruptions across the world that happened recently. And Naysha said as a result of this, Thorgy isn't able to come to Roscoe's because her flight was cancelled. But instead, they got Detox because she's local to Chicago. They then started watching this week's episode, and they watched the part where the crew and PAs got quick drag makeovers from the queens. Naysha said that the PAs on set are really cool and they support the queens so much. And when Naysha was on All Stars 8, when they did the Fame Game runways, the PAs would come and stand off stage to cheer for the queens when they were doing their runways. And this was because at that point, the queens had already been eliminated, but they wanted to, quote, hype them up, so the PAs cheered for them. Caramel then mentioned that speaking of makeovers, Detox has, quote, had the pleasure of doing 2 makeovers on Drag Race, one on Season 5 and one on All Stars 2. Detox laughed and said, quote, I don't know about the pleasure, and everyone laughed. Caramel then said that the second makeover with her sister was probably more the pleasure than the first one. Detox said the makeover on Season 5 was fun, but they had, quote, jam-packed so much bleep there that we didn't have much time to even do the makeover. Detox also said that she was running really behind with the makeup and all of the other things, but they also threw the curveball of having to do the flag routine dance as well, which Detox described as, quote, dumb. And she was just so exhausted by that point in the competition that she didn't know what she was doing, and that's clearly why she ended up in the bottom that episode. They then watched the part of this week's episode when RuPaul had a tic-tac lunch with the queens and they were all quite emotional. Naysha then said that this episode must have been, quote, exhausting for RuPaul, and everyone started laughing. Naysha added that RuPaul must have felt like it took so much out of her because she had to compliment all of the queens. Naysha then joked that Ru probably had to ask for a break between queens, and Detox joked that Ru probably didn't know the queens' names and said, quote, what's your name again? I effing love you. But Detox said it is genuinely emotional when you're on set with Ru, and Ru changes the queens' lives in so many ways, so when Ru says that she's proud of you, it's really rewarding. Detox also said, quote, even though she has an in-ear telling them who they are, and everyone laughed. Naysha then mentioned that Chanel was bawling her eyes out, and she did an impression of Ru just sitting there and staring blankly at Chanel. And Naysha said, quote, I can almost guarantee that she was probably the last one of the day, and Ru just couldn't take it anymore. Detox then mentioned that she didn't do a Tic Tac lunch on her seasons, but she did do the podcast with Ru and Michelle on All Stars 2. Naysha said that Michelle makes you feel, quote, super comfortable, and for example, Ru never really interacts with the queens on social media, but Michelle always does, and if you see her in person, she always knows what the queens have been up to and talks to them, and Detox said, quote, now that's mother. Detox also said that years ago, when they did the shows like Battle of the Seasons and Work the World, Michelle was the host of a lot of those things, so they got to travel the world with Michelle and they got really close with her. Naysha then mentioned What You Packin', which is the YouTube show hosted by Michelle where she interviews the queens after they've been eliminated. And when Naysha did What You Packin', Michelle gave Naysha her phone number, and Naysha said that she was kind of surprised, but she felt like it was, quote, really genuine, and she said kudos to Michelle, and everyone cheered for Michelle. They then moved on and watched some more of this week's episode, and Naysha said she wanted to touch on something. And every time they talk about a particular queen doing a runway or she's on screen, people laugh, and that queen is Nina West. And when Naysha said Nina's name, some people in the audience laughed. Naysha said, quote, "See, you guys laughed, and that's the problem. Two things can be true. You can be a fierce drag queen, and you can be bad at Drag Race. Nina West is sickening. Nina West is a great person." Naysha went on to say that Nina, quote, "had a bad season, who cares, but you shouldn't define someone's drag just on the basis of a TV show, and Naysha is, quote, kind of getting sick of it, and people cheered." Naysha said that Nina deserves so much more than that, and they've talked before about her amazing charity work and that she's raised millions of dollars for charity, even from before she was on Drag Race. Detox agreed and said that Nina has always been community driven and it's, quote, awe-inspiring to see that she's been doing it for 20-something years. Naysha finished by saying that although they watch the show and they joke about stuff and talk crap, that's where it should stop. There was then a moment in the Roscoe's video where they muted the audio because there must have been some copyrighted music in the background. And Thorgy Thor came onto stage and everyone started screaming and cheering for Thorgy because they thought she wasn't going to be there. Once everyone had settled back down, Thorgy explained that she had no idea about the huge IT outage problems that were going on, so she was getting ready for her flight from New York to Chicago, and one of her friends told her that all flights were cancelled. But Thorgy still decided to go to the airport and she said she'd figure it out. She then said when she got to the airport, there were lots of angry people on their phones yelling things like, quote, "What do you want me to do? My flight is cancelled." And Thorgy said, quote, "This is good drama. Even if I don't make it to Roscoe's, this is still a good show." And everyone burst out laughing. Thorgy then said that she waited at the airport and her flight was about 4 hours delayed. So she called Sean, who's the manager of Roscoe's, and said that she wasn't sure if she was going to make it on time. But she did eventually catch her flight and she landed and got ready in 45 minutes. And everyone clapped for Thorgy. Thorgy then said she had another story she wanted to tell and everyone laughed again because Thorgy always has a very funny, chaotic energy. Thorgy brought up Ellie Diamond, who competed on Drag Race UK Season 2. Apparently, a long time ago, Ellie kept saying on Twitter that she wanted to date and sleep with Thorgy, but Thorgy doesn't go on Twitter much, so she never saw it. But eventually, people kept telling Thorgy about it, so Thorgy messaged Ellie and said that they went back and forward for ages being, quote, cheeky with each other. And a while later, Ellie did a sale where she sold some of her drag outfits, and one of them was, quote, this piece of crap that Thorgy was wearing. And Thorgy said she decided to buy something from Ellie because they hadn't talked for a while, so she thought that she would buy something to, quote, get back in with her. The outfit was apparently, quote, exuberantly expensive, and the shipping was $4,000, but Thorgy still bought it and paid Ellie right away. 2 months then went by, and Thorgy still hadn't received the garment, and said, quote, where's my garment I bought, you thief? Thorgy then messaged Ellie and asked where the garment was, and Ellie said, quote, oh yeah, but didn't really respond. The next day, Ellie apparently posted a photo of her wearing the garment at a club. So Thorgy commented on the photo saying, quote, can I have my garbage garment please, B? Thorgy then said, quote, you just stole from me. Now I really want to date her. And everyone burst out laughing again. Thorgy continued and joked that Ellie is a, quote, pathological thief, you're amazing, let's go to Applebee's. And Thorgy stood up and showed off the outfit that Ellie made. I then saw on Twitter that someone had posted this clip of Roscoe's of Thorgy telling this funny story, and Thorgy commented on it saying, quote, "Love Ellie Diamond," and Ellie replied saying, quote, "Love you." And this reference to Thorgy saying love is a reference to her viral moment on the pit stop on All Stars 7 when Thorgy made a joke about the singer Pink and said she didn't like Pink and that Pink was a, quote, "bad seed on this earth." But Thorgy joked and asked them to cut that part out of the pit stop, but they didn't. And then they cut the camera and Thorgy pretended that she never said that, and when Bob asked Thorgy again if she liked Pink, this time Thorgy said, quote, "love Pink." And since then, this thing of love Pink has become a viral moment associated with Thorgy.
Do you want to say anything to Pink, personally?
I really just don't like her. She's a bad seed on this earth. You can cut that out, right? Please.
By Pink. What do you think of this song?
Love Pink.
And Trixie Mattel brought it up again on the pit stop for All Stars 9 when Thorgy was a guest, and Thorgy said people now always come up to her all the time and just say, quote, "love Pink." In fact, earlier at Roscoe's, all of the hosts had said that they had deliberately worn pink for this week's viewing party in Thorgy's honour. Also, one other thing I saw on social media about this outfit that Ellie made for Thorgy is that the day after the Roscoe's episode came out, Ellie posted an Instagram story that said, "Garbage Garment, the trilogy," and there was a photo of Ellie, Thorgy, and also Willem wearing the outfit. Anyway, back to Roscoe's, and Caramel said that speaking of Pink, there was a VIP member question which was, besides Pink, who else do you think is a bad seed on this earth? And everyone laughed. Thorgy then said, quote, "well, we're watching Drag Race, so let's talk about who I hate from Drag Race." Thorgy then explained that wherever they go in whatever city they're in for shows, the show promoters always ask the queens the same question, which is, which queens do you hate? Which Thorgy described as a very dark-sided question. So Thorgy said she always turns the question around and asks the promoters, quote, "well, who was horrible when you had them here?" Thorgy then asked the audience, quote, "can anybody guess who every single gig said?" Some people in the audience shouted out names such as Violet Chachki. Thorgy then said she loves meeting these people and she loves everyone, but then she said, quote, "but Alyssa Edwards, but I don't want to mention any names," and everyone laughed. Detox said that it's always the fan favourites and then said, quote, "if you only knew." Naisha said that Shangela is probably a close second, and a few people gasped, but Naisha clarified that it's because of timing. Detox agreed and said it's because of timing and being late, not because they're monsters. Naisha added that most of the time they tell the queens to be ready at 7, but the queens aren't actually ready until 9. Thorgy then said, quote, "it's too much, it's being rude to everyone, we're all ready to go, the fans are screaming, let's go, and she walks in a towel." Thorgy joked that she kind of loves the nerve of a queen to walk in that late and not give a damn, but she also said, quote, "but get ready." Naisha then told a story of a time they were in England for a show, and both Shangela and Alyssa were there. And the meet and greet happened before the show at 8 o'clock, and so Naisha lied and told Shangela that she needed to be ready at 6:30. So Shangela came in at 8 o'clock and was ready on time, and Naisha turned to the show promoter and said, quote, "you're welcome." And we have heard from queens before that Alyssa can be tricky to work with. For example, Trixie and Katia were once on Hey Queen and they were talking about Alyssa Edwards. And Katia said that she was, quote, "a diva." And both Trixie and Katia said that they had, quote, "very strong opinions about Alyssa." Trixie then told a story about a tour that they were on and said that some queens have a talent of being on time, but Alyssa is not one of them. And, quote, "Alyssa Edwards, always and forever, but only sometimes." Trixie also said that watching Alyssa's secret on TV is fun, but living Alyssa's secret on a tour bus is something else. Apparently, during this tour, Alyssa was late for the meet and greet, and Mimi First was the director of the tour, and Mimi confronted Alyssa and said that if she can't be on time, she's fired. Trixie then said that there was a quote big fight and security were called, and Milk crouched between Mimi and Alyssa and had to push them apart. Alyssa then apparently turned to them and yelled, quote, "I don't want to be on this B-cast tour anyway." Trixie also said, quote, "Newsflash, currently at this moment we're not feeling that energy either." But they all forgave each other and Alyssa was back on tour 2 days later. And years later on Trixie and Katya's YouTube show, Trixie once said that she had some beef with Alyssa and they had once talked about it in an interview. And Alyssa must have seen this interview and called Trixie directly and they squashed the beef on the phone and Trixie really appreciated Alyssa's direct way of dealing with the drama. And it's since been assumed that this Hey Queen interview with Trixie was probably what Alyssa was referring to, and this may have been responsible for Trixie and Alyssa reconciling. Anyway, back to Roscoe's, and they moved on to the Q&A, and Thorgy had spoken earlier about how she was a trailblazer in classical music in drag because she played in the London Philharmonics, and she was probably one of the first drag queens to do that. This then led Thorgy to talk about other ways in which she's a trailblazer, and Thorgy said she was a trailblazer when it comes to forming alliances on Drag Race. Apparently, when Thorgy was on All Stars 3, right away she went to every single person and asked them if they wanted to be in an alliance, but she always made sure it was on camera. And people just kept saying things like, quote, "Oh, I don't know." Thorgy said she tried to form an alliance with literally every single queen on the cast, but they all said no, and she later found out that all of the queens were already in alliances. But Thorgy thinks that she's the one who started the alliance thing on Drag Race. Also, they had previously talked about if they had to go back to All Stars, who from their original seasons would they want to be in teams with? Thorgy said for her it would be Chi Chi DeVayne, who sadly passed away in 2020. Thorgy said she misses Chi Chi so much and thinks about her every day. Thorgy also said she's not sure she's ever talked about this before, but after their season, she and Chi Chi got really close, and Thorgy had lived her whole life in New York and Chi Chi was from Louisiana. But Chi Chi said she really loved San Francisco and she seriously considered moving there. And Thorgy had said that she would go and live with her too and they were seriously considering being roommates together. But then Chi Chi unfortunately started getting sick. But Thorgy told everyone to give it up for Chi Chi and everyone clapped and cheered for Chi Chi. And finally, Thorgy brought up the love pink thing again, and she mentioned the pit stop that she recently did with Trixie Mattel, because Trixie kept bringing it up during the pit stop. Thorgy said that Trixie was being, quote, really mean about Roxy's look, and throughout the episode, Thorgy was trying to defend Roxy, and what we saw in the episode of Trixie reading Roxy's outfit was only about 10% of what Trixie actually said. According to Thorgy, Trixie kept going on, quote, rants and rants about Roxy's green outfit and said, quote, what is she? Camouflage? Was she hiding in the woods? But Thorgy said that Trixie just went on and on about how bad Roxy's look was, and a lot of it was edited out. And some of the jokes were funny, but Thorgy felt like, quote, girl, relax at a certain point. And Thorgy then said that Roxy called Thorgy the day after the pit stop episode came out and said, quote, thank you for always being a great sister. What the F did I do to Trixie? And I did talk about this in a previous video because Roxy tweeted and called Trixie out after the pit stop episode aired, so make sure you go and check out that video for more details and I'll put a link in the description. Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So I'm back for the final Roscoe's recap of this season, and this viewing party was for All Stars 9 episode 12, which was the finale. And the guests this week were Hanaconda and Queen Kong. Today we're going to be talking about why the winners of All Stars don't always come back to film their step down looks, whether eliminations are rigged on Drag Race so that other queens can come back, and allegations about an apparent lawsuit against World of Wonder by production staff due to alleged inappropriate behaviour from the queens on the set of All Stars 9. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. So they started off by talking about the moment in the episode when Jimbo, who was the winner of last All Stars season, was not there in person and was instead on a video call. Naysha said she loved the fact that Jimbo, quote, could not be bothered to come back because she was getting a paycheck elsewhere and it was, quote, so fierce. And Caramel pointed out that in the video message, Jimbo had said she loved seeing the queens all season, but this was recorded before the season even came out, so there's no way Jimbo would have seen any of the queens. And on this point of queens not coming back for their step down looks, I saw something interesting on social media this week, which was to do with Trinity and Monet not coming back for their step down on All Stars 5. On the podcast Sibling Rivalry, Trinity was the guest host, and Monet brought up that usually the winners come back for the next season of the All Stars for their step down looks, and she questioned why she and Trinity weren't there in person for the step down on All Stars 5. Trinity said, quote, "Do you want to know the tea, people? You want to know why?" Trinity then explained that she and Monet were in Australia touring at the time, and Drag Race contacted them very last minute to ask them to come back for the finale taping of All Stars 5. Trinity went on to say that she and Monet said that they were willing to cancel part of their tour dates so that they could fly back to do it, and they even spent thousands of dollars to get their step-down outfits made. But then Drag Race refused to pay for their flights from Australia to LA, and Trinity finished by saying, quote, "We were willing to move around our schedule for them, we were willing to do whatever we had to do, we were willing to lose money, we already paid for our looks, we were ready to go, so all we got was, after we came back, they made time for us to come into the WOW studio and record something on someone's phone that they used for the little message." And I just thought that this was an interesting insight into why some of the previous season winners don't come back for their step down looks in person, and that in this case Drag Race were not willing to pay for their flights. Anyway, back to Roscoe's, and Naysha said she had a question for Hannah Kondo, which was, "Why do you hate Scarlet Envy so much?" And everyone laughed. This is because on UK vs The World Season 2, Hannah and Scarlett had a few tense moments where they seemed to not get along very well, and Scarlett was at Roscoe's a few weeks ago and alluded to the fact that she and Hannah didn't really get on during the filming, but they're okay now. Hannah explained that Drag Race is a crazy situation and some of the queens, quote, become different people, and that the Scarlett that Hannah met previously was a bit different to the version of Scarlett that was on the show. Then, when Hannah confronted Scarlett on the show and told her she was being too much, Hannah felt like that was done and they could just move on. But as it turned out, Scarlett, quote, harboured that, and Hannah had to live with Scarlett's eyes, quote, piercing into my soul during the reunion. And it was obvious that Scarlett was, quote, pressed and furious. Hannah then said that it took up until they did the tour in the UK that Scarlett said to Hannah that she was really nervous that Hannah was there because Scarlett felt like Hannah hated her. But Hannah said she doesn't hate Scarlett and they've now sorted it out and they're all good. And Hannah thought that they had sorted it back when they had filmed the season, and she had no idea that Scarlett had held on to these feelings for all that time. According to Hannah, Scarlett is a, quote, dream and a fabulous entertainer, and because Scarlett has had some experiences on previous seasons when she wasn't treated the best by other queens, she feels that that might be why Scarlett reacted the way that she did. Hannah finished by saying that Scarlett gets really competitive during Drag Race, but outside of that, she's nothing like that, and she's, quote, a good egg. Naysha also said that when Scarlett was at Roscoe's, she brought gifts for all of the queens, and she is, quote, the sweetest. Queen Kong then made the point that the sense of humour in Australia is very different to the sense of humour in the States, and in Australia they, quote, go for the throat, but it's just a joke, and sometimes the queens in other countries misinterpret that humour and think that they're being hateful, but it's just a cultural difference. They then watched the rest of the episode, including the runway, and they were discussing Plastique's looks throughout the season. Hannah said that she loved Plastique's looks and Plastique is just flawless. But Hannah said the only slight issue she has is that that level of drag feels slightly unachievable for other queens, and it's nothing against Plastique because she's incredibly talented. But Hannah worries that other queens are now going to be held to the same standard as Plastique from now on, and that queens are going to get themselves into massive debt to try and pay to be at that level of drag. Hannah then shared that she went down to her last $1,000 earlier this year because she had to pay so much for all of her looks for UK vs the World, which is crap, and she said, "What other TV show do you have to pay to be on?" Naysha agreed and said that people need to understand that that level of drag is, quote, unrealistic for most queens, and when you go and see a drag show, you're not going to see that level of drag. Because the outfits on Drag Race are for a TV show, and the queens this season got $75,000 to be on the show, and Plastique reportedly spent $250,000 in total to pay for her looks, so it's a completely different situation. They then talked about Chanel's finale look, and they all said it was a pretty outfit, but it didn't look like a finale look and it didn't represent Chanel's drag. Caramel reminded them that when Chanel was at Roscoe's a few weeks ago, she revealed that she put on weight during the filming of the show, and so her finale look didn't fit. So she ended up wearing her finale look for her promo instead. And the look that she wore for the finale was a different outfit that she brought with her. They then watched the judges' critiques, and Naysha asked if there was a specific critique that they agreed or disagreed with. Hannah said, quote, "Just Ross. Everything about him irritates the bleep out of me. I don't know what it is about him. It makes my skin crawl." And even if she agrees with him, she disagrees just because it's coming from him, and everyone laughed. Naysha agreed and said that what she thinks is that Ross's critiques are not genuine, and that he thinks about how the audience is going to receive what he says. And she joked and said, quote, "I hate it." Naysha then brought up that when the judges were talking about Plastique's looks, RuPaul said that that's what she expects from All Stars, which is exactly the point that they were making earlier, that now the queens are going to be expected to have that level of drag, which is not achievable for most queens. And Hannah said, quote, "You know what? We go back to them and say, we want the money so you can get that on your All Stars." And everyone clapped and cheered for Hannah. The episode ended, and Naysha then asked a VIP question, which was, in light of the lawsuit allegations, have you heard of or witnessed bad behind-the-scenes behaviour from any of the queens? Queen Kong didn't know what lawsuit they were talking about, but Hannah said she did, so she explained. There are allegations that on All Stars 9, some of the queens had to pee in plastic bottles because they weren't allowed to leave the main stage, and the production assistants had to clean up these bottles of pee. And there were also allegations that some of the queens did not treat the production staff very well. Hannah also mentioned that there may have been an allegation of intimate assault against one of the staff members by one of the queens. Just to explain in case you don't know, these allegations about the lawsuit against Drag Race to do with All Stars 9 were brought to light by Willem, who mentioned it several weeks ago on her Race Chaser podcast. On the podcast, Willem said that a trustworthy source told her that several World of Wonder employees were allegedly suing the production company because they had to dispose of urine-filled cans and bottles on the main stage, and that the queens mistreated the production staff not only on All Stars 9 but on previous seasons as well. And allegedly, the only 3 cast members on the All Stars 9 cast who were not problematic during filming were Angeria, Nina and Chanel, who were described as, quote, not beasts. However, in the podcast, Willem said that the person who texted this to Willem and Alaska is a reliable source, and said that they overheard this in a dressing room, and Alaska implied like it might not be 100% true, but Willem said she thinks it probably is true. Willem also added that apparently it was the girls who were signed to Voss events who were the problematic ones. And Alaska said she got the feeling even before she heard about that text, because she gets the impression that some of the queens are, quote, over it, and they see Drag Race as just another job, which, quote, takes the wind out of the sails of the show. Alaska also implied that she thinks that this might be why RuPaul decided that some queens were not going to win their lip syncs, and that's why Chanel won so much stuff, because she was apparently one of the queens that was not problematic. And as I said, this rumour is unsubstantiated as far as we know, but there has been a lot of online discussion with people saying that this might be why the outcome of All Stars 9 was different from what people thought. And also, if you've watched my previous videos, you'll know that Willam got kicked out of DragCon this year, and Willam said she thinks part of the reason why she got kicked out may be because she had brought up the rumour of this lawsuit against World of Wonder. But as I said, as of now, I couldn't find any concrete evidence about this rumour, so we'll have to wait and see if any more information comes out about it. And then in terms of the allegations about intimate misconduct against some of the staff, I'm not sure which allegations specifically they were referring to at Roscoe's. However, on a different episode of Race Chaser, Willam said that apparently there were some queens who had been harassing the crew in an inappropriate way. The name of the queen was bleeped out, but Willam said she had spoken to 3 of the queens from the season, presumably All Stars 9, and they had all said it. Willam then said that when the season 16 queens came back to film their finale, that must have happened after the filming of All Stars 9. And so when the season 16 queens came back to film the finale, they all had to do a training seminar about intimate assault. And when they were asked why they had to do this seminar, they were told that there was a queen on All Stars 9 who had been getting, quote, handsy with some of the production staff and had said some inappropriate things. But Willam said, quote, it was probably just drag queens being drag queens, and queens often get naked on the show, but Drag Race maybe was just covering their backs by doing this seminar because otherwise they would be liable. And Willam also said that World of Wonder may have got mad that Willam brought up this lawsuit, and it may have sounded like Willam was implying that World of Wonder had done something wrong, but Willam said she can be fair and balanced, and she never said that World of Wonder did something wrong, she just said that there was pending litigation. And allegedly nothing has been filed yet, but there was a letter of demand. Willam also said that what she had talked about on a previous episode about being told that everyone on set were, quote, monsters except for 3 people, that may not be true, because Willam has since spoken to the one queen that apparently was described as being the worst monster, and that queen told Willam that one of the crew members said, quote, the worst thing possible to her on set, and there was a screaming match between them, and that person was, quote, put in their place. And that crew member is apparently involved in the lawsuit. Willam finished by saying that she had spoken to 3 of the queens who were on the set, so Willam isn't, quote, talking out of her ass, and this was not, quote, a titbit from Ahura. And this is referencing something that happened a while ago, that Willam had once said that she heard that Drag Race UK Season 3 had been filmed in just 10 days, but that turned out not to be true. And Willam later said that she had heard that from UK Season 2 contestant Ahura, and clearly it wasn't true. And after that, some people then said that Willam's information is unreliable. And Willam even addressed this, and said that a lot of people say that Willam lies all the time, and that you should take what she says with a pinch of salt, but Willam said, quote, I've been right a lot of times. But going back to Roscoe's, and they talked about these allegations of bottles of urine on stage that the crew had to clean up. And Naysha said there have been plenty of queens who have peed themselves on stage, such as Monet Exchange and Sasha Colby, who have both admitted openly that they peed themselves on stage during their seasons. Naysha said apparently there was even a time when potentially Monet or maybe Jada, she couldn't remember who, but they apparently peed themselves on stage in front of RuPaul, and RuPaul apparently just looked at the pee and then started clapping and said, quote, good job, and made a joke of it. Naysha went on to say that it's not okay for the queens to not be allowed to go to the bathroom, and in no other job would that be okay. And because the queens are on set and filming takes such a long time, they're not allowed to leave because time is money. So Naysha can see that there may be a possibility that a queen did pee in a bottle, although she doesn't know if it definitely happened or not. Batty then jokingly asked Naysha if she was ever rude to the production staff. Naysha said she stole stuff for them, such as makeup and makeup brushes, because they wanted some of the stuff from the set but they weren't allowed to take it, so Naysha did it for them. Hannah and Queen said on Drag Race Down Under they did the same thing and they gave some of the production staff their old costume bits and some quote care packages, and they really loved the staff so they could never imagine being rude or horrible to them. They also briefly talked about the allegations a bit later as well, and Hannah said at the moment this is all alleged and there have been many times in the past when queens' names have been dragged through the mud and it turned out not to be true. And Naysha agreed and said we'll have to wait for the details to come out, but when Naysha finds out the true tea, she'll have no problem spilling it. They then moved on to the Q&A, and a VIP member question for Queen and Hannah was, how did they feel on season 1 of Drag Race Down Under when they brought back Art Simone after her elimination and disregarded Coco and Jojo? Just to quickly explain, in case you don't know, on Drag Race Down Under Season 1, Art Simone, who is a very popular Australian drag queen, got eliminated in episode 2 after she lost the lip sync against Coco Jumbo. But Art was brought back to the competition in episode 4 and no reason was ever given. And if you're a long-time viewer of my channel, you may remember that I interviewed Coco Jumbo and she admitted that the production team lost the audio from their lip sync, so they made Coco and Art come back to refilm their lip sync and elimination multiple days after it happened. But it was never explained why Art was allowed to re-enter the competition, whereas Jojo and Coco, who were eliminated in episodes 1 and 3, were not invited to come back. Going back to Roscoe's, and when Hannah and Queen were asked how they felt about Art coming back, they said they were quote, furious, peed, and it was stupid. Queen explained that she doesn't want to discredit Art because she's a great entertainer, and it's not fair that Art got discredited because of it. But Queen said it made no sense and she thinks that's why some people stopped watching Drag Race Down Under. Hannah also said she's not sure if this is true, but she knows Coco from before, and Coco apparently told Hannah that when she was leaving the hotel after her elimination, she crossed paths with Art in the hotel because Art was being brought back. Naysha then asked why they think Art was brought back. Hannah said she's not really sure, but it may be because Art is one of the most followed and well-known Australian queens. Queen Kong then said that as a queen of colour, it was frustrating for her that both Coco and Jojo, who are also queens of colour, both got eliminated before the conversation happened on the season about race and blackface. And that was a big part of the reason why Queen decided to apply to be on season 2, because she felt like it was important that a person of colour should be in the room when those types of conversations are happening. Naysha also said she thinks that because the final decision is RuPaul's to make, sometimes there might be some tension between what RuPaul wants and what the producers want. Naysha then shared that on season 8, when she got eliminated, RuPaul apparently walked off set and was gone for quote a hot minute. And they think that RuPaul was discussing with the producers what they should do, and RuPaul was apparently watching the lip sync back, and they were quote struggling with the decision. And so Naysha did get eliminated, but then the next episode, 2 people got eliminated and Naysha was later brought back. So Naysha thinks that maybe RuPaul just decided that she wanted to bring someone back and then just said to the producers, quote, figure out how to put it in the story. There was then a question about the final lip sync on UK vs The World Season 2 and what Hannah thought the outcome was going to be. Hannah said for the lip sync against Marina Summers, she thought that Marina was definitely going to win, so Hannah went into it thinking that she didn't have a chance. But Hannah said she has been performing that number with the sunglasses and the microphone for years, and she thinks that maybe it just worked with the vibe of the song better than Marina's performance. Hannah also implied that Marina may have not known all of the words to the song, but it wasn't shown on camera. And then for the final 2 lip sync between Hannah and Tia Kofi, Hannah genuinely thought it was going to be a tie and that it would make a nice storyline, but that's not what happened. And finally, someone asked Hannah when they film the confessionals on UK versus the World. Hannah said they film it at the start of each day before they film the bit where it's a new day in the workroom and you have to recap the day before. And then at the end of the season, each queen gets brought back and they have to recap their entire run on the show depending on how many episodes they were in, and that takes about 8 hours to film. Naysha said that that's interesting because on her seasons, they would film the confessionals every couple of days at the end of the day, and sometimes they would dedicate entire days at the end of the week to just filming the confessionals. And for example, if you got eliminated on a Tuesday, you'd have to stay until Friday because that's the day that you need to film all of your confessionals. So there you go, there was the final Roscoe's recap for All Stars 9. Do you think that All Stars 9 was better than previous seasons of All Stars? And what was the most memorable moment from this season? Let me know in the comments. If you liked this video, please remember to like and comment on the video to help tell the algorithm that this is a great video, and make sure you hit the subscribe button because it really does make such a big difference to my channel. Thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me again in future videos. Thank you, bye!